When a billionaire disguised himself as a homeless man outside his own luxury hotel, every employee turned their backs, except one struggling waitress who gave him her last $20. What happened next tore Seattle's elite world apart. This is a story about masks we wear, the price of kindness, and how one freezing night changed two broken lives forever. If you want to see how far compassion can take you in a world built on greed, stay until the very end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to that rain-soaked November evening when everything began. The rain hammered down on 3rd Avenue like it had a personal grudge against Seattle. Not the gentle Pacific Northwest drizzle the tourists wrote poems about. This was the kind of cold, vicious downpour that stripped the romance right out of the city and left you wondering why humans ever thought living here was a good idea. Ryan Sterling stood under the scaffolding of a construction site 2 blocks from the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching water cascade off the metal framework and sheets. His fingers were going numb. The trench coat he'd pulled from the back of his closet, something he'd owned for maybe 15 years and never actually worn, smelled like mothballs and was doing absolutely nothing against the wind cutting through the fabric. 32 years old, $4 billion in assets, owner of 17 luxury properties across 3 continents. And here he was, shivering like a stray dog, about to walk into his own hotel dressed like he'd been living under a bridge for the past month. The irony wasn't lost on him. "You sure about this, boss?" The voice crackled through the tiny earpiece Ryan had fitted before leaving the penthouse. Marcus Chen, his head of security, sounded skeptical. "There are easier ways to audit your staff." Ryan touched his ear, pretending to scratch. To anyone watching, he just looked like another homeless guy with hygiene issues. "I've seen the reports, Marcus. Numbers don't lie, but people do. I need to see it myself." "Your funeral." Ryan almost smiled. Marcus had been with him for 6 years. Former Secret Service, the kind of guy who could kill you with a fountain pen, but mostly just killed time doing crossword puzzles in the security office. He was one of maybe 3 people in the world Ryan actually trusted, which said something pretty depressing about his life. The hotel rose ahead of him like a glass and steel monument to everything he'd built since losing Catherine. The Grand Meridian. 43 stories, 500 rooms, a rooftop restaurant that charged $70 for a steak and somehow always had a 3-month waiting list. His architect had called it a love letter to classical elegance meeting modern ambition. Ryan mostly just saw a building where he'd buried himself in work so he wouldn't have to think about the empty side of the bed. "Okay," he muttered, pulling the coat tighter. "I'm going in." He'd prepared for this carefully, hadn't shaved in a week, used makeup to add shadows under his eyes, make himself look older, more weathered, rubbed dirt on his hands and under his fingernails, practiced a stumbling walk that suggested too many years and too much cheap vodka. The hardest part had been leaving Sophie with the nanny. His daughter was 5 years old, sharp as a knife, and had looked at him with those devastating brown eyes, Catherine's eyes, and asked why Daddy looked so messy. "Playing pretend, sweetheart," he'd told her, kneeling down to her level. "Sometimes grown-ups have to do that for work." "Like Halloween?" "Exactly like Halloween." She'd giggled and made him promise to tell her the story later. That kid was the only thing in his life that still felt real. Everything else was just performance. Ryan took a breath and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit him immediately, and he genuinely gasped. Not part of the act, just his body's honest reaction to Seattle's November cruelty. Water soaked through the coat in seconds. His shoes, deliberately chosen for having holes in the soles, filled with icy runoff from the gutter. This was already worse than he'd anticipated. He shuffled toward the hotel entrance, letting his shoulders slump, keeping his eyes down. Through the massive glass doors, he could see the lobby glowing with warm golden light. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people's monthly rent. Guests in expensive clothes gliding across the space like they owned it, which, technically, they didn't. He did. The doorman, Ryan didn't recognize him, which was interesting since he made a point of knowing everyone on staff, stood under the awning, perfectly dry, perfectly pressed in his burgundy uniform. Ryan stumbled closer. "Hey," he called out, letting his voice crack. "Hey, you got a minute?" The doorman's face changed instantly. Open, friendly, professional. Those were gone. What replaced them was disgust, thinly veiled as inconvenience. Sir, you need to keep moving. I just need... Ryan swayed a little, playing it up. Just somewhere dry for a... This is a private hotel. Guests only. I got money. Ryan fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a handful of change. Quarters, dimes, pennies, maybe $3 total. I can pay for... You can't afford to breathe the air in this lobby. The doorman stepped forward, not quite touching Ryan, but making his presence felt. Move along before I call the police. Ryan let the change slip through his fingers. Coins bounced and rolled across the wet concrete, and he bent down like he was going to collect them, then gave up halfway through, looking defeated. The doorman didn't even glance at the scattered money. Please, Ryan said quietly, it's freezing out here. Should have thought about that before you ended up on the streets. The doorman pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. You've got about 30 seconds to disappear. Ryan straightened slowly, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. He wanted to say something, wanted to ask what had happened to basic human decency, wanted to point out that this man was being paid to represent the Grand Meridian's values and was currently failing spectacularly. But that would break the illusion. So instead, he shuffled toward the door. Where do you think you're going? Just trying to get warm. The doorman moved to block him. I told you. I'll stay by the door. I won't bother anyone. Please. For a second, Ryan saw something flicker across the man's face. Maybe guilt. Maybe pity. But it died fast, replaced by cold calculation. This guy had probably chased off 100 homeless people. Ryan was just number 101. You touch that door, I'm having you arrested for trespassing. Ryan's hand was already on the brass handle. The door swung open and warmth flooded out, carrying with it the scent of expensive perfume and fresh lilies from the massive flower arrangement in the lobby. For a moment, Ryan just stood there, feeling the heat on his frozen face, and it was so good he almost forgot this was supposed to be an act. Then he stepped inside. The lobby went quiet in that terrible way spaces do when something unwanted enters them. Not silent. There was still soft jazz playing, still the murmur of conversation from the bar area, but muted, aware. Ryan kept his eyes down, shuffled toward the corner near the restrooms. Harmless, invisible. He made it maybe 10 feet before the manager appeared. Victor Hale. Ryan knew this one. 47 years old, 15 years with the company, worked his way up from assistant concierge to general manager. On paper, he was efficient, professional, ran the hotel like a machine. In person, he looked like someone who'd sell his own mother for a corner office. Sir, Victor's voice was smooth, controlled, public-facing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Ryan hunched his shoulders, made himself smaller. Just came in from the rain. I'll go in a minute. You'll go now. Please, I'm not causing trouble. You're causing trouble by being here. Victor stepped closer, and his voice dropped, lost that smooth professional quality. What came out instead was sharp and mean. This is a 5-star establishment. We have standards. You are not meeting them. A couple near the elevators laughed. Ryan caught the sound, high and cruel, like he was dinner theater. I just need a minute to warm up, Ryan said, and he hated how true it felt. His fingers were still numb. Water was pooling around his feet on that expensive marble. Then I'll go, I promise. You'll go now, or I'll have security remove you. Victor snapped his fingers, and 2 men in black suits materialized from somewhere near the front desk. Both big. Both looking like this was the most interesting thing that had happened all week. Ryan's earpiece crackled. Marcus, say the word, and I'm pulling you out. But Ryan didn't respond. He was too busy watching the crowd. A woman in a fur coat whispered something to her husband, and they both smirked. A businessman with a Rolex that probably cost more than most cars recorded the whole thing on his phone, grinning like he'd just witnessed a car crash. The concierge pretended to be checking something on her computer but kept glancing over, her expression a mix of pity and revulsion. This was his hotel. These were his guests, his employees, and not one of them saw him as human. I'm sorry, Ryan said, backing toward the door. I didn't mean to... Victor grabbed his arm, not gently. You're dripping on my floor, you smell like a dumpster, and you're making my guests uncomfortable. Each word came out precise and venomous. Security is going to escort you outside, and if you ever come back, I will have you arrested. Do you understand? Ryan could have ended it right there. Could have pulled back his coat, shown the Patek Philippe watch worth more than Victor's annual salary. Could have said his name and watched every face in that lobby change from disgust to horror. But he didn't, because he needed to see how far this would go. The security guards each took an arm. They weren't gentle either. Ryan let himself be dragged toward the door, feet stumbling, coat dragging. "Wait!" The voice was small, quiet, almost swallowed by the lobby's ambient noise. Everyone stopped. A woman emerged from behind the restaurant's partition, young, maybe 30, wearing the hotel's standard server uniform that somehow looked 2 sizes too big on her. Dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. Eyes that darted around like a bird's, never landing on anything for more than a second. Ryan recognized her from the employee files. Emily Carter. Hired 8 months ago. No complaints, no commendations. Just there. Background noise in the machine. "Please," Emily said, and her voice was so soft Ryan almost missed it. "Please, he's just cold. Can't we—" "Emily." Victor's voice cut through the lobby like a knife. "Get back to your station." "I just thought—" "I don't pay you to think. I pay you to serve drinks and keep your mouth shut." Victor turned to the security guards. "Get him out of here." But Emily moved forward, and Ryan saw her hands were shaking, saw the way she kept her eyes down, the way her whole body looked like it was fighting the urge to disappear. She walked right up to the security guards. "Let him go," she whispered. One of the guards laughed. "You're kidding." "Please," Emily's voice cracked. Just let him go. I'll take care of it." Victor stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Excuse me? He's just cold. And it's raining, and—" Emily took a breath, and Ryan saw her hands ball into fists, saw her physically force herself to keep talking. "And it's not right. We can't just throw him back into the storm." The lobby was dead silent now. Victor walked over slowly, and there was something predatory in the way he moved. He stopped right in front of Emily, so close she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "Are you questioning my authority?" "No, Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, sir." "Then get back to work." Emily flinched, but she didn't move. Instead, she turned to Ryan, and for the first time, her eyes met his. Brown eyes, tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much disappointment and not enough kindness. "Are you hungry?" she asked. Ryan blinked. "What? Are you hungry? I can get you something from the kitchen, just something small. And you can sit in the staff area until the rain stops. It's warm there, and dry." Victor's face went purple. "Emily, you are way out of line. I'm just trying to help. You're just trying to get yourself fired." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Emily went pale. Her hands stopped shaking, not because the fear was gone, but because it had frozen her completely. "Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "I'm so tired," Victor said slowly, "of bleeding hearts like you making my job harder. This is a business. We have standards, we have rules, and we do not allow homeless people to loiter in my lobby, no matter how much it hurts your delicate feelings." "I understand, but—" "No buts, no second chances, no more warnings." Victor turned to the security guards. "Throw him out. And Emily?" He looked back at her with something like satisfaction. "You're done here. Clean out your locker and leave your uniform at the desk." Emily's face crumpled. "Mr. Hale, please, I need this job." "Should have thought about that before you decided to play hero." Ryan watched her eyes fill with tears she was too proud to let fall. Watched her bite her lip so hard he thought it might bleed. Watched her shoulders curve inward like her body was trying to protect her heart from another blow. And something in him, something that had been cold and calculating and observant, caught fire. He opened his mouth to stop this, to end it, to reveal himself and burn Victor's career to ash. But Emily spoke first. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll leave. But let me walk him out, please. Just that." Victor waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever. Just get both of you out of my sight." The security guards released Ryan's arms, and Emily stepped forward. She was maybe 5'4", looked like a strong breeze would knock her over, and she positioned herself between Ryan and the door like a shield. "Come on," she said softly. "I'll help you." They walked toward the exit together, Emily's hand gentle on his elbow. The lobby crowd watched them go with mixed expressions. Some disgusted, some pitying, most just indifferent. The doorman held the door open with a smirk. And they stepped back into the freezing rain. The noise of the storm swallowed everything, the jazz music, the lobby conversations, Victor's satisfied expression. It was just Ryan and Emily standing under a narrow awning, water cascading past them like a curtain. Emily's server uniform was already soaked through. She was shivering. "You didn't have to do that," Ryan said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "Yes, I did." Emily pulled something from her apron pocket, a small umbrella, the cheap kind that fell apart after 3 uses. She opened it and held it over Ryan's head. "Everyone deserves kindness. That's what my mom used to say." Used to, past tense. Ryan heard the grief in those words. "You just lost your job for me." "I know." Emily's smile was sad and small and somehow still genuine. "But I couldn't just stand there and watch them treat you like you weren't a person. That's not who I want to be." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her. Soaked uniform, cheap shoes with worn heels. No coat despite the cold. Dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many double shifts and not enough sleep. A girl? No, a woman, who probably made minimum wage plus tips, who had just sacrificed her income to defend a stranger. His earpiece crackled again. "Marcus. Boss, this has gone far enough. Let me come get you." But Ryan ignored him. "Where are you headed?" Emily asked, water dripping from her hair. I don't have anywhere to go." It was a lie, obviously. He had a penthouse apartment worth $8 million and a daughter waiting for him to come home. But in this moment, playing this role, it felt true enough. Emily bit her lip, thinking. Then she pulled out her phone, cracked screen, budget model, and tapped something. "I'm calling you a cab," she said. "I can't pay for—" "I can." She looked embarrassed saying it. "I've got maybe $20. It should get you to a shelter. There's one on Pike Street that's okay. They'll give you a bed and a hot meal." Ryan stared at her. "You're giving me your last $20. It's not much, but you just lost your job." "I know." "You probably need that money for rent, for food." "I know." Emily's voice got even quieter. "But you need it more right now." The cab pulled up, windshield wipers working overtime. Emily opened the door and helped Ryan inside, her umbrella barely keeping either of them dry. She leaned in and handed the driver a crumpled $20 bill. "Pike Street shelter, please." The driver nodded, pocketed the money. Emily started to close the door, but Ryan caught it. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Emily. Emily Carter." "Thank you, Emily." She smiled, genuinely smiled, and for a second she didn't look tired or scared or beaten down. She just looked kind. "Stay warm," she said. Then she closed the door and the cab pulled away. Ryan watched her through the rain-streaked window as she stood there under her tiny umbrella, getting smaller and smaller until the city swallowed her completely. His earpiece exploded with Marcus's voice. "What the hell was that? You just let her pay for your cab? Boss, this is getting weird." Ryan touched his ear. "Send a car to pick me up 2 blocks east." "And Marcus?" "Yeah?" "I want everything we have on Emily Carter. Employment records, background check, credit report, social media, everything. I want it on my desk within the hour." "We already have her employee file." "I want more than that. I want to know who she is." A pause. Then, "Boss, what are you thinking?" Ryan watched the Grand Meridian's lights fade behind him, thought about Victor Hale's satisfied smirk, and the lobby full of people who'd treated him like garbage, and then thought about Emily Carter standing in the freezing rain, giving away money she couldn't afford to lose to help someone she thought had nothing. "I'm thinking," Ryan said slowly, "that I just found something rare." "What's that?" "Someone real." The cab driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Pike Street shelter?" Ryan pulled out his phone, the expensive one he'd hidden in his coat pocket, not the cheap burner he'd been using for the act. 3 missed calls from his sister, 7 emails marked urgent, a text from Sophie's nanny asking when he'd be home. He typed back, "On my way." Tell Sophie Daddy's Halloween game went very well. Then he made another call. James? It's Ryan. I need you to do something for me. James Corrigan, his attorney, the kind of lawyer who could make problems disappear or appear depending on which side you were on. There's a woman named Emily Carter who just got fired from the Grand Meridian. I want you to make sure her rent is paid for the next 3 months. Anonymously, use one of the charity foundations. Ryan, what? And find out what her situation is. Debts, family, medical issues, anything that's causing her stress. Quietly. This is very cryptic. I'll explain later. Just do it. He hung up. The cab driver tried again. Sir? The shelter? Change of plans, Ryan said, peeling off the fake beard that was starting to itch like hell. Take me to Madison Park. I'll give you the exact address. That's going to cost more than $20. Ryan pulled out his wallet, the real one, and handed over $100. Keep the change. The driver's eyes went wide, but he took the money and turned the cab around without another word. Ryan settled back into the seat, his mind already working. The test had been successful, too successful maybe. He'd confirmed that the Grand Meridian staff had serious problems, that Victor Hale was exactly the kind of manager he'd suspected, efficient on paper, cruel in practice. But he'd also found something unexpected. Emily Carter, who gave away money she didn't have, who defended a stranger at the cost of her job, who looked exhausted and scared and fragile but still chose kindness over self-preservation. Ryan thought about the empire he'd built, the hotels, the properties, the investments that generated money while he slept. He thought about the people who worked for him, thousands of them, and realized he had no idea how many of them would do what Emily had done. Probably none. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Cars waiting. Also, Emily Carter's file is interesting. No family, dead parents, student loans she's been paying off for 8 years. Works 2 jobs. Currently 3 months behind on rent despite working 60-hour weeks. Want me to keep digging? Ryan typed back, yes. And Marcus? This stays between us. Understood. But boss, what are you planning? Ryan looked out the window at Seattle's rain-soaked streets, at the people hurrying past under umbrellas and the warm lights in apartment windows and the whole complicated mess of the city he'd helped build. What was he planning? He didn't know yet. Not exactly. But he knew one thing. Emily Carter had protected him when he'd needed it most, and now it was his turn. The cab pulled up to his building, 40 stories of glass and steel overlooking Elliott Bay. The doorman rushed out with an umbrella, clearly confused by why Mr. Sterling was arriving in a budget cab wearing homeless person cosplay. Good evening, sir. Rough night? Ryan climbed out, rain immediately soaking through his coat again. You have no idea. But it's about to get interesting. He walked into his building, leaving wet footprints across the pristine lobby floor, and took the private elevator to the penthouse. Sophie was waiting when he opened the door, already in her pajamas, eyes bright with curiosity. Daddy, you're all wet and messy. I know, sweetheart. He knelt down and she immediately hugged him, not caring about the rain or the smell or the makeup smudged across his face. Did you have a good Halloween game? I did. I learned something really important. What? Ryan thought about Emily's face as she'd stood in the rain, thought about her quiet voice saying everyone deserves kindness, thought about the way she'd looked at him, not as a billionaire or a boss or a problem to be solved, but just as a person who needed help. I learned, he said slowly, that there are still good people in the world. We just have to know where to look. Sophie giggled and pulled back to study his face. You look silly. I know. Let Daddy get cleaned up and then I'll read you a story, okay? Okay. She ran off toward her bedroom and Ryan stood up slowly, his body aching from the cold and the stress and the sheer weirdness of the night. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. More info on Emily Carter. She's got medical debt from when her mom died 2 years ago. Cancer. Emily took care of her full-time while working. That's how she fell behind on everything. There's also a note in her employee file from Victor Hale saying she's too soft for hospitality work, but kept her on because she never complains and picks up extra shifts. Ryan felt something dark and cold settle in his chest. Too soft. Victor had known exactly who Emily was. Someone kind, someone who couldn't afford to lose her job, someone who would endure bad treatment because she had no other options. And he'd fired her anyway, for helping someone. Ryan walked to his office, still dripping water, and opened his laptop. The Grand Meridian's internal system loaded, showing him every metric, every report, every detail of the hotel's operations. On paper, everything looked perfect. Occupancy rates high, revenue trending up, guest satisfaction scores solid. But Ryan had just spent 15 minutes in that lobby, and he'd seen the truth underneath the numbers. He'd seen the cruelty, the contempt, the way his employees treated people they deemed beneath them. And he'd seen the one person who'd resisted that culture and watched her get crushed for it. His phone rang. James, his attorney. I've got the information you wanted. Emily Carter's rent is covered for 3 months, set up through the Sterling Foundation's Community Assistance Program. She'll never know it came from you. Good. What else? Medical debt totaling $43,000 from her mother's cancer treatment. Student loans at $62,000. Credit cards maxed out. She's been making minimum payments on everything but falling further behind each month. Honestly, Ryan, one more financial hit and she's looking at bankruptcy. Fix it. What? All of it. Pay off the medical debt. Pay off the student loans, credit cards. Whatever she owes, clear it, anonymously. Silence on the other end. Then, Ryan, that's over $100,000. I'm aware. For someone you met tonight. Someone who gave me her last $20 when she thought I was homeless. Ryan's voice went hard. Someone who lost her job protecting me from my own security team. Someone who deserves better than the hand she's been dealt. This is unusually generous, even for you. Just do it, James, and make sure there's no trail back to me. I don't want her feeling like charity case. Understood. Anything else? Ryan thought about it. Yeah, I need you to start building a case against Victor Hale. Harassment, hostile work environment, potential embezzlement. Dig into everything. I want enough to bury him so deep he never works in hospitality again. This is about the girl. This is about a lot of things. But yeah, partly it's about her. She shouldn't have been fired for showing basic human decency. I'll start pulling records tomorrow. Tonight. Ryan. Tonight, James, please. Another pause. You sound different. I feel different. Ryan looked at his reflection in the darkened window, still wearing the homeless disguise, makeup running, hair plastered to his skull. I spent years building this company, thinking I was doing something good, creating jobs, providing luxury experiences, contributing to the economy. But tonight I realized I have no idea what actually happens in my own hotels. I've been so focused on the numbers that I forgot about the people. That's not entirely fair to yourself. Maybe, but it's fair enough. Ryan started peeling off the wet coat. Get me that information on Victor. And James, I'm going to need you to set up a meeting with HR. I want a complete review of every manager in the company, starting with the Grand Meridian. This is going to take time. Then we'd better start now. He hung up and walked to the bathroom, finally catching a full look at himself in the mirror. The disguise had worked too well. He looked exactly like what he'd been pretending to be. Tired, beaten down, invisible. No wonder everyone had treated him like garbage. The question was, how many people like Emily Carter were out there, working for him, being treated the same way? And how many Victor Hales did he have running his properties, putting profit over humanity? Ryan scrubbed the makeup off his face, changed into dry clothes, and went to read Sophie her bedtime story. She picked The Velveteen Rabbit, which felt appropriate somehow, a story about becoming real through love and pain. After she fell asleep, he returned to his office and started going through Emily's file more carefully. Born in Spokane. Only child. Parents died in a car accident when she was 19, except that wasn't quite right. Her father died in the crash, her mother survived but developed cancer 2 years later. Emily had taken care of her until the end. No siblings, no extended family mentioned in her emergency contacts. She'd worked her way through community college while caring for her dying mother. Graduated with a degree in hospitality management, ironic given where she'd ended up, and moved to Seattle looking for better opportunities. That was 3 years ago. Since then, 7 different jobs in the service industry, none lasting more than 8 months. The reasons for leaving varied, seeking better opportunities, scheduling conflicts, mutual agreement, but Ryan could read between the lines. She kept getting fired or forced out for being too soft, too kind, too human in industries that demanded you check your humanity at the door. The Grand Meridian had been her longest job yet, 8 months, and Victor had just destroyed that too. Ryan pulled up Victor's file next. 15 years with the company, stellar performance reviews, every metric trending positive under his management. Guest complaints down, revenue up, staff turnover. Actually, staff turnover was higher than the company average, but HR had noted that Victor maintained high standards and wasn't afraid to remove underperformers. Underperformers. Ryan wondered how many underperformers were just people like Emily who dared to show compassion. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mr. Sterling, this is Emily Carter. I wanted to thank you for helping that man tonight. I know I lost my job, but it was the right thing to do. I hope he made it somewhere safe. Ryan stared at the message, confused. Then he realized she must have gotten his number from… No, wait. She thought she was texting someone else. Maybe another employee who'd witnessed what happened. He typed back, I think you have the wrong number. A pause. Then, oh God, I'm so sorry. I meant to text my friend Lisa. Please ignore this. But Ryan didn't ignore it. Instead, he saved her number and sat there thinking about what she'd said. I know I lost my job, but it was the right thing to do. She didn't regret it. She'd sacrificed her income, her stability, her future, and she didn't regret it. When was the last time Ryan had met someone like that? He pulled up the Grand Meridian schedule and started making plans. Tomorrow he'd go back to the hotel. Not as a homeless man this time, as himself, as the owner. And he'd start asking questions that Victor Hale wouldn't want to answer. But tonight, he had one more thing to do. He opened a new email to his assistant. Sandra, I need you to find someone for me. Emily Carter, recently unemployed. I want to offer her a position, but I need to be strategic about it. She can't know it's connected to what happened tonight. Make it look like a legitimate job posting, something she'd apply for on her own. Corporate office, entry level, but with growth potential. And make sure the salary is enough to actually live on. He hit send, then leaned back in his chair and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, Emily Carter was probably lying awake, worrying about rent and bills and how she'd explain another firing to her next potential employer. And somewhere closer, Victor Hale was probably sleeping soundly, satisfied that he'd maintained his precious standards. Neither of them knew that their lives were about to change completely. Ryan smiled, not a kind smile, but a cold, calculating one. You wanted to see how I handle underperformers, Victor? He said to the empty office. Let me show you. Emily's apartment was a joke, and not the funny kind. 400 square feet on the third floor of a building that should have been condemned sometime around the Clinton administration. The radiator clanked like it was trying to communicate with aliens. The window didn't close all the way, so there was always a draft that made the plastic blinds rattle. The bathroom sink dripped no matter how hard you cranked the faucet, a steady rhythm that had become white noise after 3 years. She sat on her second-hand couch, $20 from a garage sale, springs poking through the cushions, and stared at her phone. 2:47 a.m. She'd been staring at the screen for 2 hours, refreshing her bank account like the numbers would magically change. They didn't. Balance? $127.43. Rent due in 5 days? $950. She'd sent that text to the wrong number earlier, some stranger who probably thought she was insane. Perfect. Just perfect. Add can't even text properly to the list of ways Emily Carter was failing at life. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table. A piece of plywood balanced on milk crates, very chic, and she wondered if she should start calling other restaurants tonight or wait until morning. Did it matter? Word spread fast in Seattle's service industry. Victor Hale knew everyone. By tomorrow, every decent restaurant in the city would know she'd been fired for insubordination. The rain hammered against her window, same as it had been doing for hours. Same as it would probably keep doing until June, because this was Seattle, and rain was the one constant you could count on. Emily pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her mom's old cardigan tighter around her shoulders. It still smelled like her sometimes, if Emily didn't wash it too often. Lavender and vanilla. Comfort in fabric form. What would you do, Mom? She whispered to the empty apartment. But she knew what her mother would say. The same thing she'd always said when things got hard. You did the right thing, baby. That's what matters. Except the right thing didn't pay rent. The right thing didn't keep the electricity on. The right thing definitely didn't erase $43,000 in medical debt that Emily would be paying off until she was 60. Her laptop sat on the milk crate coffee table, ancient and held together with electrical tape and prayer. She opened it, waited through the 3 minutes it took to boot up, and started scrolling through job listings. Server position, downtown. Experience required, $12 per hour plus tips. Barista, Capitol Hill. Must have open availability, $13 per hour. Night shift custodian, office building, $14 per hour, no benefits. Every listing felt like a trap. Take this job, work yourself to death, still can't afford to live. Repeat until you break or die, whichever comes first. Emily's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Crying was useless. Crying didn't solve problems. Crying was what she'd done for 6 months straight after her mom died, and it hadn't brought her back. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hope you're doing okay. Emily frowned. The person she'd texted by accident earlier? Why were they still... Another message. Sorry if this is weird. You seemed like you were having a rough night. She should have blocked the number, should have ignored it. Instead, she typed back, I've had better nights. But thank you. The response came fast. For what it's worth, standing up for someone took guts. Most people wouldn't. Emily laughed, a bitter sound in the quiet apartment. Yeah, well, most people are smarter than me. Or less kind. She stared at those 2 words for a long time. Then she set the phone down and went back to job hunting. By 4 a.m., she'd applied to 11 positions. By 5, she'd given up and tried to sleep, but her brain wouldn't shut off. By 6, she was back on the couch with instant coffee that tasted like battery acid and checking her email compulsively. Nothing. At 7, her neighbor started playing bass-heavy music through the paper-thin walls. At 8, the guy upstairs began what sounded like moving furniture, which he did every single morning for reasons Emily couldn't fathom. At 9, she showered in water that alternated between scalding and freezing, put on the one professional outfit she owned that wasn't her server uniform, and decided to hit the pavement. She'd apply in person, hand managers her resume, smile, make eye contact, do all the things the career counselor at community college had taught her back when she'd still believed hard work mattered more than connections. The rain had stopped, replaced by that gray mist Seattle called weather. Emily walked to the bus stop, paid with quarters, and rode downtown with her resume folder clutched in her lap. First stop, an upscale Italian place she'd always thought looked nice. The host took one look at her resume and said they weren't hiring. Emily saw 3 now hiring signs on her way out. Second stop, a hotel restaurant, different company than the Grand Meridian. The manager actually interviewed her, seemed interested, asked for references. Emily gave him her previous supervisor's number, not Victor, never Victor, and watched his expression change when he made a note of where she'd worked most recently. We'll be in touch, he said, which was manager speak for don't hold your breath. 3rd, 4th, 5th stops. Variations on the same theme. Either not hiring, or they'd call her, or they needed someone with more experience, or the position had just been filled. Sorry. By 2 p.m., Emily was exhausted. Her feet hurt. Her professional smile felt like it was going to crack her face in half. She sat on a bench in Westlake Park and ate a granola bar from her purse, watching business people rush past with their coffee and their purpose. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. She opened it, expecting another automated rejection. Instead, Dear Ms. Carter, thank you for your interest in Sterling Hospitality Group. While we don't have any current openings that match your experience, we'd like to keep your resume on file for future opportunities. Additionally, we're currently conducting a company-wide review of our service standards and would value input from experienced hospitality professionals. Would you be available for a brief consultation this week? Compensation provided. Please respond to schedule. Emily read it 3 times. Sterling Hospitality Group. That was Ryan Sterling's company, the Billionaire, the one who owned half the luxury properties in Seattle, including the Grand Meridian. She hadn't applied to them, hadn't even looked at their website. How did they get her resume? Her finger hovered over the delete button. This had to be a scam. Or a mistake. Companies like Sterling Hospitality didn't randomly email unemployed waitresses asking for consultations, but the email address looked legitimate. And there was a phone number, a real office address downtown. Emily pulled up the company website on her phone. Corporate headquarters, 4 blocks from where she was sitting. She could walk there, right now, just show up and see if this was real. Or she could go home, eat ramen, and keep applying to places that would ghost her. Terrible idea, she muttered to herself. Then she stood up and started walking. The Sterling Hospitality Group offices occupied the top 12 floors of a glass tower that probably cost more than Emily would earn in her entire life. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space that made you feel poor just by entering it. Emily approached the reception desk, acutely aware of her off-brand blazer and scuffed shoes. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I help you? I got an email about a consultation. Name? Emily Carter." The receptionist typed something, and her expression shifted slightly. More interested, less dismissive. "Oh yes, Miss Carter, let me call upstairs." She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then hung up. "Someone will be right down to get you." Emily sat in one of the lobby chairs, trying not to touch anything expensive. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She was starting to think this was definitely a mistake when the elevator dinged and a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped out. "Emily Carter?" "Yes?" "I'm Sandra Wu, executive assistant to Mr. Sterling. Thank you so much for coming in on short notice." She extended her hand and Emily shook it, confused. I just got the email this morning." "Yes. Well, when Mr. Sterling wants something done, we move quickly. Please, follow me." They rode the elevator to the 38th floor in silence. Emily watched the numbers climb and felt like she was ascending into a different dimension where people like her didn't exist. The elevator opened onto a reception area that made the lobby look budget. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay. Real art on the walls, not prints, originals. Furniture that probably cost more than Emily's car, back when she'd had a car. Sandra led her through a maze of offices and conference rooms, finally stopping at a door marked Private. "Mr. Sterling is on a call, but he should be finished shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Sandra smiled, a real one this time. "Between you and me, you look terrified. Don't be. He's surprisingly normal for a billionaire." Then she left Emily alone in a waiting area with chairs too nice to actually sit in. Emily perched on the edge of one anyway, her resume folder in her lap, her heart trying to escape through her ribs. This was insane. She shouldn't be here. She should leave right now before... The door opened. Ryan Sterling walked out, and Emily's brain short-circuited. This was not the homeless man from last night. This was a man in a custom navy suit that fit him like it had been painted on. Hair-styled, clean-shaven. Everything about him screamed wealth and power and the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about rent. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Blue-gray, intense, and currently looking at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Ms. Carter," he said, and his voice was different too, stronger, commanding. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." Emily stood on legs that felt like water and followed him into his office. It was ridiculous. That was the only word for it. The office was bigger than her entire apartment, with that same floor-to-ceiling window view, a desk that looked like a work of art, shelves lined with books and awards and framed photos. Ryan gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit." She sat gripping her resume folder like a life preserver. Ryan settled into his own chair, and for a moment he just looked at her. Not creepy, just studying, like she was something unexpected. "I'm sure you're confused about why you're here," he said finally. "A little, yes. I'll be direct. I'm conducting a review of service standards across all Sterling hospitality properties. I've been disappointed by what I've found. I need people who understand what hospitality actually means, not just people who know how to maximize profit margins." Emily nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. "Your resume came across my desk. I didn't apply here." "No, but we have talent scouts who monitor the industry. When someone with your experience becomes available, we take notice." That was a lie. Emily knew it was a lie. She'd been a waitress for 8 months. Nobody scouted waitresses. But she didn't call him on it. "What exactly would this consultation involve?" she asked. "I want you to tell me the truth about what it's like working in hospitality. Not the sanitized version managers put in reports. The real version. What happens when guests are cruel? How staff are actually treated? What it's like to work for people like... He paused. People like Victor Hale. Emily's stomach dropped. You know Victor? I know of him. He runs the Grand Meridian. He fired me last night. I know that too. The words hung in the air between them. Emily felt heat creep up her neck. So this is... what? Pity? No. Ryan leaned forward and his expression was serious. This is me trying to understand how my company actually operates. And you're someone who just sacrificed her job to help a stranger. That tells me you understand what hospitality should be. It tells you I'm bad at self-preservation. A smile flickered across his face. Maybe. Or maybe it tells me you have principles most people have forgotten. Emily looked down at her hands. Her nails were short, practical, no polish. Her mom used to paint them for her on Sunday afternoons, bright colors that made her feel fancy. She hadn't painted them since the funeral. What do you want me to say? She asked quietly. That the industry is broken? That people treat service workers like garbage? That managers like Victor get away with being cruel because they meet their numbers? She looked up, met his eyes. You already know all that. You don't need me to tell you. But I need someone to help me fix it. I'm a waitress. You were a waitress. What if you could be more? Emily laughed, couldn't help it. Mr. Sterling, Ryan. Mr. Sterling, she repeated firmly, because using his first name felt insane. I appreciate whatever this is, but I don't have the education or the experience to work for a company like this. I have a community college degree and a resume full of jobs I couldn't keep. I'm not executive material. The executives I have are part of the problem. I don't need another MBA who sees people as profit centers. I need someone who sees them as human beings. That's a nice sentiment, but the consultation pays $500. 4 hours of your time this week. You tell me about your experiences, I take notes, we both go on with our lives. No commitment beyond that. He slid a contract across the desk. Simple. Emily stared at the paper. $500. That was almost 2 weeks of groceries. Or half her rent, or... Why me? She asked. Really? Ryan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Because last night, in my lobby, you were the only person who treated a homeless man like he mattered. Everyone else looked away or looked disgusted. But you stepped up, even though it cost you. That's rare. That's just basic decency. Exactly. And apparently basic decency is now a rare commodity worth investing in. Emily picked up the contract, scanned it. Standard consultation agreement, everything looked legitimate. $500 for 4 hours. No hidden clauses about signing her life away. If I do this, she said slowly, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. If you want the truth about what it's like down there, it's not pretty. I don't want pretty. I want honest. She looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find the catch. Rich people didn't just hand out money to unemployed waitresses. They didn't care about basic decency or humanity or any of the things he was talking about. But his expression was serious, and there was something in his eyes that reminded her of... Wait, the homeless man last night, the one she'd helped. She'd looked into his eyes in that moment when she'd given him the umbrella, and they'd been the same color, the same intensity. Emily's breath caught. No, that was impossible. Ryan Sterling wouldn't... Is something wrong? Ryan asked. No, she said quickly, too quickly. I'll do it. The consultation. Excellent. When are you available? I'm unemployed. I'm available whenever. That smile again, small and genuine. Tomorrow then, 10 a.m. We'll start with coffee and conversation. Okay? She stood and he stood with her, extending his hand. She shook it, and his grip was firm, warm. Thank you, Ms. Carter. Emily, if you're going to pay me to talk, you should probably use my first name. Emily, then. Sandra appeared to escort her back to the elevator. Emily walked through the office in a daze, barely registering the expensive furniture or the view or anything except the surreal feeling that her life had just tilted sideways. In the elevator, Sandra handed her a business card. My number's on there. If you need anything before tomorrow, call me. Thank you. Can I give you some advice? Emily nodded. Ryan Sterling is a good man. Workaholic, sometimes ruthless in business, definitely intense. But good. If he's taking an interest in your situation, it's because he sees something worth investing in. Don't sell yourself short. The elevator opened onto the lobby, and Emily stepped out into the real world, feeling like she'd just visited another planet. $500. She could pay her electricity bill, buy groceries that weren't ramen. Maybe, if she was careful, put some toward rent. Emily walked back to the bus stop, pulled out her phone, and stared at her bank balance again. $127.43. Tomorrow it would be $627.43, assuming this wasn't all some elaborate fever dream. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Emily spent it staring out the window, watching the city roll past, trying to process what had just happened. Ryan Sterling wanted her opinion. Ryan Sterling thought she had something valuable to offer. Ryan Sterling. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. She opened it, expecting spam. Instead, from Seattle Credit Union. Subject, account alert, deposit received. Emily's heart stopped. She clicked through to her account. Balance, $127.43. Pending deposit, $43,267. Her phone fell from her hands, bounced on the bus floor. The woman next to her gave her a look, but Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe. $43,000, the exact amount of her medical debt. Someone had paid it, all of it, every cent. Her hands shook as she picked up the phone, refreshed the page, convinced it was a mistake. But the number stayed the same. The payment source was listed as Sterling Foundation Community Assistance. Emily's vision blurred. Her chest felt tight. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She pulled the emergency stop cord, stumbled off the bus 3 blocks from her apartment, and stood on the sidewalk trying not to hyperventilate. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Ms. Carter, this is James Corrigan with Sterling Legal Services. I'm calling to inform you that your medical debt has been cleared through our community assistance program. You should receive official documentation within 3 business days. I didn't apply for assistance. Our program identifies individuals who meet specific criteria for financial relief. You qualified based on your circumstances. What circumstances? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but rest assured this is legitimate. The debt is cleared. You owe nothing. Emily's knees felt weak. Why me? The Sterling Foundation helps dozens of people every month. Consider yourself fortunate. He hung up before she could ask more questions. Emily made it to her apartment somehow, unlocked the door with shaking hands, and collapsed on the couch. $43,000. Gone. Just gone. She pulled up her student loan account next, barely daring to hope. Balance, $0 paid in full. Her credit cards, $0 everything. Every debt that had been crushing her for years. Erased. Emily curled up on the couch and cried, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken and finally starting to heal. This wasn't random. This wasn't some community assistance lottery. This was Ryan Sterling. It had to be. But why? Because she'd helped someone in the rain? Because she'd gotten fired standing up for what was right? Or because the homeless man, those eyes. Oh my God, she whispered to her empty apartment. That had been him, Ryan Sterling, testing his employees. And she'd helped him, not knowing who he was. And now he was, what? Rewarding her? Paying her back? Emily grabbed her phone, pulled up her sent messages, found the unknown number from last night. Was that you? At the hotel? 3 dots appeared immediately, like he'd been waiting. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have accepted the money if you knew it was from me? She stared at that message for a long time. Because he was right, she would have refused, would have been too proud, too uncomfortable, too aware of the massive power imbalance between them. This is too much, she typed. It's exactly enough. You gave me your last $20. I'm just returning the favor. That's not the same thing at all. Why not? Because I'm not a billionaire. I can't afford to be generous. You can. That's precisely why it means more when you are. Emily set the phone down, her heart racing. This was insane. You didn't just accept $100,000 from a stranger. You didn't let billionaires erase your debts because you'd held an umbrella over their head. Her phone buzzed again. Emily, I need you to understand something. What you did last night, that wasn't about money. It was about character. And character is the one thing I can't buy, can't manufacture, can't fake. I've spent years building a company, but I've been failing at building the right culture. You showed me what that culture should look like. This isn't charity, it's an investment. In what? In someone who might actually help me fix what's broken. She read that message 5 times, then typed, "The consultation tomorrow. Is that real, or is this all just pity?" It's real. I meant every word. I need your help. I'm nobody. You're the person who looked at someone everyone else had written off and saw a human being who needed help. In my world, that makes you extraordinary. Emily pulled her mom's cardigan tighter, breathing in the faded scent of lavender. "What do I do, Mom?" she whispered. But she already knew. Her mom would have told her to trust her gut, to take the chance, to believe that sometimes kindness came back around. She picked up her phone again. "Okay, tomorrow, 10 a.m., but I'm paying for my own coffee. Deal." Emily set the phone down and looked around her tiny apartment, the cracked walls, the rattling blinds, the milk crate coffee table. All of it exactly the same as it had been yesterday, except everything had changed. Emily showed up 15 minutes early the next morning, which turned out to be a mistake because it gave her too much time to panic in the lobby. She'd changed outfits 4 times, settled on black slacks and a cream blouse that weren't fancy but at least looked clean. Spent 20 minutes on makeup she rarely wore, trying to look professional instead of like someone who'd cried herself to sleep. Again, the debt thing kept hitting her in waves. She'd wake up, remember, feel relief so intense it hurt, then feel guilty for accepting it, then grateful, then confused, then the whole cycle would start over. Sandra appeared at 9:58, punctual as a Swiss watch, wearing another perfect suit that probably cost more than Emily's entire wardrobe. "Ready?" she asked with a warm smile. "As I'll ever be." They rode the elevator up, and Emily tried not to think about how her life had become a series of elevator rides to places she didn't belong. Ryan's office looked different in morning light, less intimidating somehow. Or maybe Emily was just too exhausted to be properly intimidated anymore. He stood when she entered, and Emily noticed he wasn't wearing a suit today. Just dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her rent, but at least made him look slightly less like a corporate robot. "Emily, thank you for coming." He gestured to a small table by the window where someone had set up coffee, pastries, and what looked like actual china. "I thought we'd skip the desk. This feels less like an interrogation." "Does it happen often, the interrogations?" A smile flickered across his face. "More than you'd think. Please sit. Help yourself to anything." Emily sat, poured coffee into a cup so delicate she was afraid to hold it. The coffee smelled expensive. Probably was expensive. Everything in this building probably cost 10 times what normal things cost. Ryan sat across from her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Emily broke first. "We should probably talk about the elephant in the room." "The debt relief? The $100,000 you dropped into my account like it was pocket change, yes." Ryan added cream to his coffee, methodical. "I was hoping we could focus on the consultation first." "I can't focus on anything else. You paid off my medical bills, my student loans, my credit cards, everything. Why?" "I told you why. You told me it was an investment. That's not an answer. That's a business term." He met her eyes, and there was something in his expression she couldn't read. "Would you have taken the money if I'd asked first?" "No." "Then there's your answer. You needed help. I could provide it. The fact that you'd refuse made it more important to do it anyway." Emily set her coffee down before she dropped it. "That's not how normal people operate." "I'm not normal people." "No kidding." The words came out sharper than she intended, and Ryan actually laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. "Sorry," Emily said quickly. "That was, honest, which is exactly what I'm paying you for." He leaned back in his chair. "Emily, I'm going to be direct with you. I don't do charity. I don't make investments without expecting returns. What I did wasn't kindness for kindness's sake. It was removing obstacles that would have prevented you from being useful to me. Useful? Yes. You can't help me fix the company if you're drowning in debt and working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. Consider it optimizing my asset. Emily felt something hot and sharp in her chest. I'm not an asset. I'm a person. Poor word choice. I apologize. Ryan rubbed his face, and for the first time he looked tired. I'm better with numbers than people, which is the problem. What problem? The one where I've built a multi-billion-dollar company and apparently failed to notice it's full of people like Victor Hale who treat other humans like garbage. He poured more coffee, and his hand wasn't quite steady. I spent 15 years focused on expansion, acquisition, profit margins. I told myself I was creating jobs, providing opportunities, contributing to the economy. And maybe I was, but I wasn't paying attention to the cost. Emily watched him carefully. This didn't sound like a prepared speech. This sounded like something he'd been chewing on for a while. The cost, she said slowly. Being what, exactly? People, culture, the actual human experience of working for my company. Ryan looked at her, and his eyes were intense. Do you know how many employees Sterling Hospitality has? No. 43,000, across all properties, all positions. 43,000 people whose lives are impacted by decisions I make. And until 3 nights ago, I had no idea what their actual day-to-day experience was like. So you dressed up as a homeless person? So I dressed up as a homeless person, he confirmed, to see how my staff treated the most vulnerable person who might walk through the door. And I learned that out of everyone in that lobby, guests, staff, management, only one person gave a damn. You. Emily picked at a croissant, tearing it into small pieces without eating any. I'm not special. I just did what my mom taught me. Tell me about her. That's not what you're paying me for. I'm paying you to help me understand what hospitality actually means. Your mother clearly understood it. So yes, that's exactly what I'm paying you for. Emily was quiet for a long moment, watching the city through the window. Seattle looked different from up here. Cleaner, more organized, like all the messy human parts were edited out. She was a nurse, Emily said finally. Worked in hospice care for 20 years. Spent every day with people who were dying, and she'd come home and tell me stories about them. Not sad stories, good ones. About the man who wanted to eat chocolate cake for breakfast every day because why the hell not, he was dying anyway. About the woman who made her promise to water her plants after she was gone. About the couple who'd been married 60 years and still held hands every single day. Ryan listened without interrupting. She used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything. That the smallest gesture, holding a door, remembering someone's name, just seeing them, that stuff mattered more than people realized. Emily's throat felt tight. She got cancer, stage 4. By the time they found it, there wasn't much to do except make her comfortable. And I watched all these nurses and hospice workers treat her with the same kindness she'd shown thousands of other people. It was like watching her philosophy come full circle. How long did you take care of her? 11 months. Worked during the day, took care of her at night. Slept maybe 4 hours a night. Watched her get smaller and weaker and lose herself piece by piece. Emily's voice cracked. And the whole time, even when she was in pain, even when she couldn't remember my name, she'd still say thank you to anyone who helped her. Still tried to smile at the nurses, still tried to be kind. She sounds like an incredible person. She was. And when she died, I was drowning in medical debt because insurance doesn't cover shit, and I realized that all her kindness, all her years of helping people, none of it protected her from dying alone and in pain and leaving her daughter bankrupt. Emily looked at him. So yeah, I helped you in the rain, because that's what she would have done. But I'm not naive enough to think kindness actually matters in the real world. It doesn't pay bills. It doesn't change systems. It just makes you feel slightly less terrible about how broken everything is. The silence that followed was heavy. Ryan set down his coffee cup very carefully. You're wrong. About what? Kindness not mattering. It brought you here. It brought me to you. It's about to change 43,000 lives. Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're giving me way too much credit. Am I? You stood up to Victor Hale knowing it would cost you your job. You protected someone you thought was homeless, knowing you couldn't afford to. You're sitting here telling me the truth, even though you could have just taken the money and told me what I wanted to hear. Ryan leaned forward. That's not nothing, Emily. That's exactly what I need. For what? To help me burn it all down and rebuild it right. Emily stared at him. You're serious? Completely. I want to gut the management structure at the Grand Meridian. Fire everyone who's made that place toxic. Rebuild the culture from scratch. And I want you to help me do it. I'm a waitress. You were a waitress. What if you could be more? It was the same question he'd asked yesterday, but it landed different now because now Emily could see he actually meant it. What does more look like? She asked carefully. Ryan pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. I've been thinking about this all night. Here's what I'm proposing. You come work for me directly. Not as an assistant, not as staff. As a consultant embedded in the organization with full authority to investigate, question, and report on anything you find. You'll have access to all properties, all records, all employees. Your job is to tell me what's actually happening versus what the reports say. Emily opened the folder. Inside was a contract, a job description, and a salary number that made her brain short-circuit. This says $85,000, plus benefits, health insurance, retirement matching, education reimbursement if you want to finish your degree. This is insane. This is what the position is worth. To who? I have zero qualifications for this. You have the most important qualification. You give a damn about people. Ryan's voice was firm. I have plenty of employees with MBAs and business degrees who can optimize revenue streams. I need someone who can optimize humanity, someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless and invisible and treated like you don't matter. Emily's hands shook as she held the contract. This was too much, too fast, too everything. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Because I'll fail. Because I don't know what I'm doing. Because people like me don't get opportunities like this. And there's a reason for that. What reason? Because we're not qualified. Says who? The same system that put Victor Hale in charge? The same system that values credentials over character? Ryan's voice was passionate now, almost angry. I'm tired of qualified people who've been trained to see humans as profit centers. I want someone unqualified, someone who still has enough humanity left to be shocked by the things everyone else has learned to accept. Emily closed the folder, pushed it back across the table. I can't take this. Yes, you can. No, I really can't. This is too much money, too much responsibility, too much... Emily. Ryan's voice was gentle now. What are you afraid of? And that was the question, wasn't it? Emily looked at her hands, at her unpainted nails, at the calluses from carrying heavy trays and scrubbing dishes. I'm afraid I'll take this job and prove everyone right. That I'm just a waitress who got lucky. That I don't belong in rooms like this, making decisions that affect thousands of people. That you'll realize you made a mistake and I'll go back to being nobody, except now I'll know exactly how far I fell. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Can I tell you a story? Emily nodded. When my wife died, I was 26 years old with a 2-year-old daughter and a company that was hemorrhaging money. Everyone told me to sell. My board, my investors, even my own family said I should cut my losses and do something sensible. But I didn't. You know why? Why? Because it was the only thing I could control. I couldn't bring Catherine back. I couldn't fix the unfairness of losing her, but I could build something. So I worked. 80, 90 hours a week. Missed Sophie's first words, her first steps, years of her childhood, all to build this empire. He gestured at the office, the view, the whole glittering city. And I told myself it was for her, that I was securing her future, that all this meant something. But, Emily prompted, but 3 nights ago I stood in my own hotel lobby dressed like garbage, and not one person saw me as human except you. And I realized I'd built an empire that had forgotten what it was supposed to be for. I'd prioritized growth over goodness, profit over people. I'd become exactly what I'd sworn I'd never be. Ryan's voice was rough now, raw in a way that made Emily's chest ache. So when you say you're afraid of failing, I understand. I'm terrified too, because fixing this means admitting I broke it in the first place. It means tearing down structures I built and firing people I hired, and admitting that for all my success, I got the most important things wrong. He looked at her. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who hasn't been corrupted by this world yet. Someone who still believes kindness matters even when it costs something. Someone like you. Emily felt tears prickling at her eyes. You don't even know me. I know you gave a stranger your last $20. I know you got fired for defending someone you thought was powerless. I know you're sitting here arguing with me instead of just taking the money, which means you have integrity. Ryan smiled, sad and small. That's more than I know about most of my executives. Emily picked up the folder again, opened it, stared at the contract. The salary was real. The job description was real. This whole insane opportunity was real. If I do this, she said slowly, I need you to promise me something. What? If I screw up, when I screw up, you have to tell me. Not gently, not diplomatically, just straight truth. Because the worst thing you could do is let me fail while pretending I'm succeeding. Deal, and I need you to promise me something too. What? That you'll trust yourself as much as I'm trusting you. That you won't let imposter syndrome convince you to play small. That you'll speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. His eyes were intense, especially when it's uncomfortable. Emily took a shaky breath, thought about her mom, about kindness costing nothing but meaning everything, about the fact that someone was finally offering her a chance to do something that mattered, and she was about to talk herself out of it because she was scared. She picked up the pen on the table. This is insane, she muttered. Completely insane, Ryan agreed. She signed the contract. Ryan's smile was genuine, relieved, like he'd been holding his breath. He extended his hand and Emily shook it, and just like that, her life pivoted again. When do I start? She asked. How about right now? 3 hours later, Emily was sitting in a conference room with a legal pad, a recording device, and her 5th cup of coffee while Ryan outlined his plan. The Grand Meridian is where we start, he said, pacing in front of a whiteboard covered in organizational charts. It's the flagship property. If it's this broken, others probably are too, but we fix this one first, make it a model, then expand. Okay, how? You're going undercover. Emily looked up from her notes. Excuse me? Not as a homeless person, Ryan said quickly. As an investor. I'm bringing in a consultant to evaluate the hotel for potential acquisition. Someone with deep pockets and high standards. You. I don't know anything about investing. You don't need to. You just need to be observant and ask questions. I'll give you a full backstory, documentation, everything you need. You'll check in as a guest, evaluate the service, the staff treatment, the culture. You'll have access to the same spaces guests see, but you'll be looking for different things. Like what? Like how staff are treated when they think nobody's watching, how managers talk to employees, who's afraid, who's angry, who's checked out. The things that don't show up in guest satisfaction scores. Emily wrote this down, her hand moving fast. And then what? Then you report back to me. Everything you see, hear, and experience. We build a case, and once we have enough evidence, we move. Move how? Ryan's expression went cold in a way that made Emily shiver. I fire everyone who's made that place toxic, starting with Victor Hale. The vindication in his voice was sharp enough to cut. Emily understood it. She wanted to see Victor face consequences too, but something about the certainty bothered her. What about the staff who were scared of him? She asked. The ones who stayed silent because they needed their jobs. Ryan paused mid-pace. What about them? Are they guilty too, for not standing up? That's different. Is it? I mean, I stood up and got fired, but lots of people don't. Not because they're bad people, but because they have kids to feed or rent to pay or they're just tired of fighting. Are we punishing them too? Ryan sat down across from her, and his expression was troubled. What are you suggesting? I don't know. I'm thinking about all the people who probably hated working for Victor but couldn't risk speaking up. If we come in and burn everything down, what happens to them? They get better management. Maybe. Or maybe they get fired during the restructuring. Or maybe they get new managers who are just as bad but better at hiding it. Emily set down her pen. I'm not saying don't hold people accountable. I'm saying we should be careful about collateral damage. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, studying her. You're already better at this than I am. At what? Seeing the complexity. I was ready to go in with a flamethrower. You're asking about the people who might get burned. My mom used to say that hurt people hurt people. Maybe some of the managers who are cruel now used to be kind. and the system broke them. Maybe they need help, not just punishment. And maybe some people are just assholes who should never have been given power. Emily laughed despite herself. Yeah, maybe that too. Ryan pulled the whiteboard closer, started making notes. Okay, so we don't just document the problems. We document who's complicit, who's actively harmful, and who's trapped. Then we make distinctions. 3 categories, Emily said, thinking out loud. People who created the toxic culture and need to go. People who participated but might be salvageable with better leadership. And people who were victims of it. That's good? That's really good. Ryan wrote faster. We'll need to be thorough. Can't make assumptions based on position alone. Right. Some entry-level staff might be just as cruel as management, and some managers might be trying to protect their teams. They worked for another hour, mapping out the investigation strategy. Emily filled pages with notes, questions, observations. It felt surreal. She'd been unemployed 36 hours ago, and now she was planning an undercover operation at a luxury hotel. Around 2 p.m., someone knocked on the conference room door. Sandra poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Sophie's nanny called. She wants to know if you'll be home for dinner. Ryan checked his watch, cursed softly. Tell her yes, 6:30. Sandra nodded and disappeared. Emily watched him, curious. Sophie's your daughter? Yeah, she's 5. His whole face changed when he said her name, softening into something unguarded. She's the reason I'm doing this, honestly. I don't want her growing up thinking the way I've run this company is normal. Don't want her to see people as transactions. Does she know what you do? She knows Daddy owns hotels. She doesn't really understand what that means. Ryan smiled. She asked me once why I had to go to work if I already owned the building. Couldn't I just play there instead? Smart kid. Too smart. She sees through everything. He paused. You should meet her sometime. She'd like you. The casual way he said it made Emily's stomach flip. This was getting weird. Good weird, maybe, but weird. She was supposed to be an employee, a consultant, not someone who met the boss's daughter. Maybe, she said non-committally. Ryan seemed to realize what he'd said because he cleared his throat and went back to the whiteboard. Right, anyway, we should finalize your cover story. They spent another hour building Emily's fake identity. Madison Cole, independent hospitality consultant from Portland, representing a private equity firm looking to acquire luxury properties in the Pacific Northwest. Reputation for being demanding but fair, with a particular interest in service culture and employee satisfaction. That last part is important, Ryan said. It gives you an excuse to ask staff about their experience without seeming weird. Won't Victor be suspicious? Victor will be too busy trying to impress you to be suspicious. Men like him see wealthy women as either conquests or challenges. Either way, he'll want to prove how competent he is. Emily made a face. Great. You'll need appropriate clothing, credit card with a high limit, documentation about Madison Cole's background in case anyone checks. This is very elaborate for hotel reconnaissance. You'd be surprised how thorough people are when there's money involved. We need the cover to be airtight. Ryan pulled out his phone, texted someone. I'm having Sandra set you up with a personal shopper. You'll need business clothes, evening wear, luggage. Everything has to look expensive. I don't need... Yes, you do. You're playing a role. The costume matters. Emily thought about arguing, but realized he was right. Madison Cole wouldn't show up at the Grand Meridian with a Target suitcase and off-brand blazers. Okay, she said. When do I check in? Friday. That gives us 3 days to prep. You'll stay the weekend, really get a feel for the place. Different shifts, different staff, different guest experiences. And you'll be nowhere near you, can't risk anyone connecting us. Ryan's expression was serious. Once you check in as Madison Cole, we can't have direct contact. Everything goes through Sandra via encrypted messages. No calls, no texts from my personal number. Nothing that could blow your cover. The reality of it hit Emily then. She was going to walk back into the Grand Meridian, the place that had humiliated her and fired her 3 days ago, as a completely different person. She'd sit in the restaurant where she used to serve drinks. She'd walk past Victor Hale, the man who'd destroyed her, and he wouldn't even recognize her. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. What if someone recognizes me? She asked. They won't. You'll have professional hair and makeup, expensive clothes, completely different body language. People see what they expect to see. They expect a waitress to look and act like a waitress. Madison Cole will be nothing like Emily Carter. I'm not sure I can pull this off. Yes, you can. You stood up to Victor when you had everything to lose. This is easy compared to that. Emily wasn't sure she agreed, but she nodded anyway. Sandra appeared again around 4 with a schedule. Personal shopper appointment tomorrow at 9, followed by media training at noon. Apparently Madison Cole needed to know how to handle herself in professional settings. Then dinner with Ryan and his legal team to finalize the documentation. Media training? Emily asked. How to talk to people with money and power without looking intimidated, Sandra explained. Posture, vocabulary, confidence. It's basically acting lessons for rich people. I feel like I'm in a spy movie. It's honestly not that different from what we do every day in corporate America. Everyone's performing a role. Sandra smiled. You'll be fine. And if you need anything, call me, day or night. After Sandra left, Ryan walked Emily to the elevator. The office had emptied out. Apparently normal people went home at reasonable hours, which Emily had forgotten was a thing. Thank you, Ryan said as they waited for the elevator. For saying yes, for taking a chance on this. You paid off my debt and offered me a 6-figure salary. Not exactly a hard sell. You could have walked away, decided it was too weird, too risky, too much pressure, but you didn't. The elevator dinged. Emily stepped inside, then turned to face him. My mom used to say that sometimes the universe gives you opportunities disguised as terror, that the things that scare you most are usually the things you need to do. She sounds like she was very wise. She was. Emily's throat felt tight. I just hope I don't let her down. You won't, Ryan said with certainty. And Emily? That thing you said about hurt people hurting people, about being careful with collateral damage. Don't lose that. Don't let this job make you cynical. Is that what happened to you? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, I think it is, which is why I need you to remind me what actually matters. The elevator doors started to close, and Emily pressed the button to hold them open. Ryan, can I ask you something? Of course. That night in the rain, when you were pretending to be homeless, did you actually feel what it's like to be invisible? To have everyone treat you like you don't matter? He was quiet for a long moment. Yes. Good. Don't forget it. The doors closed, and Emily rode down to the lobby alone, her head spinning with everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been unemployed and drowning in debt. Now she had a job, a mission, and apparently a billionaire who thought she could help him save his company. Her phone buzzed as she walked outside. A text from the number she now knew was Ryan's. Thank you for not letting me forget. Emily smiled despite herself and typed back, That's what you're paying me for, remember? No, that's what makes you different from everyone else I've ever hired. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just sent a thumbs up emoji and started walking toward the bus stop. Except there was a car waiting. Black sedan, driver standing by the open door. Miss Carter? The driver said. Mr. Sterling arranged for me to take you home. Of course he did. Emily almost said no. She could take the bus. She'd been taking the bus her whole life. But then she thought about Madison Cole. Madison wouldn't take the bus. Madison would accept the car without thinking twice about it. So Emily slid into the back seat and let herself be driven home like it was normal, like her life hadn't just completely transformed, like she had any idea what she was doing. The driver dropped her off in front of her building, and Emily climbed the 3 flights to her apartment feeling like she'd lived 3 different lives in one day. Inside, everything was exactly the same. The rattling blinds, the dripping sink, the milk crate coffee table. But Emily wasn't the same. She'd signed a contract, made a promise, committed to something that scared her more than anything she'd ever done. She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app one more time, just to make sure it wasn't a dream. Balance, $627.43. Pending deposit, $0. Medical debt, $0. Student loans, $0. It was real. All of it was real. Emily changed into her mom's cardigan, made ramen because old habits died hard, and sat on her couch staring at her laptop. She pulled up the Grand Meridian website, looking at photos of the lobby where she'd been humiliated, the restaurant where she'd worked, the luxury she'd served but never experienced. In 3 days, she'd walk through those doors again. Not as Emily Carter, invisible waitress. As Madison Cole, powerful consultant. And she was going to burn Victor Hale's world to the ground. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt right. Emily smiled into her ramen and whispered to the empty apartment, "Okay, Mom, let's see where this goes." The next 3 days were a blur of transformation that felt less like preparation and more like becoming someone else entirely. The personal shopper was a woman named Diane, who took one look at Emily's Target wardrobe and said, with impressive diplomacy, "We're starting from scratch, aren't we?" They spent 4 hours in boutiques Emily had only ever walked past, trying on clothes that cost more than her old monthly salary. Diane had opinions about everything: the cut of a blazer, the drape of a dress, which shoes said, "I have money," versus, "I'm trying too hard." "Madison Cole wouldn't wear this," became Diane's refrain, holding up anything remotely affordable or comfortable. Emily stood in a dressing room wearing a charcoal suit that fit her like it had been engineered by NASA, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked competent, powerful, nothing like the girl who'd served drinks 3 days ago. "How does it feel?" Diane called from outside. "Expensive," Emily called back. "Good, that's the point." By the end, Emily had 4 suitcases full of clothes she'd never wear again after this assignment, a leather portfolio that cost $800, and a watch that made her physically ill when Diane mentioned the price. "I can't wear a $15,000 watch," Emily hissed. "What if I lose it?" "Then we'll buy another one. You're representing a private equity firm, not a nonprofit. Act like it." The media training was worse. A consultant named Richard spent 3 hours critiquing everything about how Emily moved through the world. "You apologize too much. Stop it. You make yourself smaller when you enter a room, shoulders back. That upward inflection at the end of sentences makes everything sound like a question. Statements are flat, confident. Stop playing with your hair, it signals nervousness." By hour 2, Emily wanted to punch him. By hour 3, she was walking differently, talking differently, holding herself like she owned space instead of borrowed it. "Better," Richard said, watching her cross the room for the 20th time. "You're still too nice, but we'll work on that." "I thought being nice was good." "Not in business. Nice gets you exploited. Professional courtesy is fine. Niceness is weakness." Emily thought about her mom, about kindness costing nothing, and wondered if this was how people lost themselves. One tiny compromise at a time until you forgot who you used to be. That night, she met Ryan and his legal team at a restaurant so fancy it didn't have prices on the menu. James Corrigan, the lawyer who'd paid off her debts, was exactly what Emily expected. Mid-50s, silver hair, suit that probably cost more than a used car. The other 2 attorneys were younger, sharper, and spent the dinner drilling Emily on Madison Cole's backstory until she could recite it in her sleep. Ryan barely spoke, just watched her field questions with an expression Emily couldn't read. When dessert came, something involving gold leaf that seemed obscene, James leaned back and said, "She's good. Natural liar." "I'm not lying," Emily protested. "I'm just omitting certain truths." "That's what lying is in corporate America." James smiled. "You'll fit right in." After the lawyers left, Ryan walked Emily outside to where the driver waited. The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the rustle of wind through the trees. "You okay?" Ryan asked. "I feel like I'm losing myself," Emily admitted. "Like I'm putting on this costume and forgetting which parts are real." "The parts that made you want to help someone in the rain, those are real. The rest is just armor." "What if I like the armor too much? What if Madison Cole is easier to be than Emily Carter?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, his face shadowed in the streetlight. "When Catherine died, I threw myself into work so hard I forgot what it felt like to be human. I wore the armor 24/7. It protected me from grief, but it also protected me from joy, from connection, from Sophie." His voice went rough. "Don't make my mistakes. Remember why you're doing this." "To catch the bad guys? To help the good ones. There's a difference." Emily thought about that as the car drove her home, about the distinction between punishment and protection, between justice and revenge. Friday morning arrived too fast. Emily stood in her apartment at 8 a.m. surrounded by designer luggage, wearing a cream silk blouse and tailored black pants that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her hair had been professionally styled, sleek, sophisticated, nothing like the messy bun she usually wore. Makeup applied by someone who actually knew what they were doing. Even her nails were perfect, painted a subtle nude that Diane had insisted was power neutral. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her phone buzzed. Sandra. Car's downstairs, you've got this. Emily took a breath, channeled every bit of confidence she'd practiced, and became Madison Cole. The Grand Meridian looked different when you arrived in a black Mercedes instead of on foot soaking wet. The doorman, not the same one from that night, thankfully, rushed to open her door with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Welcome to the Grand Meridian, ma'am. Emily stepped out like she'd done this 1,000 times, letting the driver handle her luggage. She walked through those same glass doors where she'd been dragged out days ago, and this time every head turned to look, not with disgust, with interest, assessment, the kind of attention money commanded. The lobby was exactly as she remembered. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the massive flower arrangement that probably cost more than her old rent. But seeing it as a guest instead of staff felt surreal, like watching a play from the audience after years of being backstage. Victor Hale stood near the concierge desk, and Emily's heart lurched. But she kept walking, chin up, shoulders back, every bit the powerful consultant. He noticed her immediately. Of course he did. Men like Victor had radar for wealth. Good morning, he said, approaching with that smooth professional smile. Welcome to the Grand Meridian. I'm Victor Hale, General Manager. If there's anything at all we can do to make your stay exceptional, I'm sure there will be, Emily said, her voice cool and controlled, not Emily's soft, apologetic tone, Madison's. I have a reservation. Madison Cole. She watched his face as he processed the name, saw the flicker of recognition. He'd been briefed about the potential investor, the high-value guest who could make or break the hotel's reputation. Of course, Ms. Cole. We've been expecting you. He snapped his fingers at the front desk clerk. Presidential suite, immediately. The clerk, a young woman Emily vaguely recognized from her time working here, jumped into action, typing frantically. I trust you had a pleasant journey from Portland? Victor asked, oozing false charm. Productive, Emily said. She let her eyes scan the lobby, taking in details. Interesting space, very traditional. The way she said it made traditional sound like outdated. Victor's smile tightened. We pride ourselves on classic elegance. Our guests appreciate. I'm sure they do. Emily cut him off smoothly, the way she'd watched powerful people do. Not rude, just busy, important. I'd like to settle in. We can discuss the details later. Of course. Of course. Victor gestured to a bellhop. Marcus will show you to your suite. Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything. Anything at all. The bellhop, an older man with kind eyes, gathered her luggage and led her to the elevator. Once the doors closed, his professional mask slipped slightly. First time at the Grand Meridian, ma'am? For business, yes. I've heard mixed reviews. It's a fine hotel, he said carefully. Too carefully. Emily made a note of that. The presidential suite was ridiculous. 3 rooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a bathroom bigger than her entire apartment, fresh flowers everywhere, a bottle of champagne on ice with a card from Victor welcoming her and offering his personal assistance. She tipped the bellhop generously, Madison would, and waited until he left before letting herself react. Holy shit, she whispered to the empty suite. Her phone buzzed, an encrypted message from Sandra. How's the room? Emily typed back. Obscene. I have a chandelier in my bathroom. Welcome to the other half. Remember to document everything. Right, the mission. Emily spent the next hour exploring the suite, taking photos, making notes. Then she changed into business casual, black slacks, a burgundy silk blouse, and headed downstairs to observe. The hotel restaurant was busy with the lunch crowd. Emily took a table near the back where she could watch the staff without being obvious. She ordered sparkling water and a salad she had no intention of eating, then settled in to watch. The servers moved through the space with practiced efficiency, but Emily could see the strain underneath, the way they flinched when managers walked past, the forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes, the careful way they avoided making mistakes, like people who'd been punished too many times. One server, a girl who couldn't have been more than 20, dropped a fork. The sound was small, barely noticeable in the ambient noise, but the fear that flashed across her face was huge. She picked it up quickly, glancing around like she expected someone to yell. Emily's chest tightened. That had been her, just days ago. That constant anxiety, that bone-deep exhaustion. A man in a suit, assistant manager, based on his name tag, appeared beside the girl. He said something Emily couldn't hear, but the girl's face went pale. She nodded rapidly, apologized, hurried away. Emily made a note. Staff discipline visible to guests, fear-based management. She spent 2 hours in the restaurant watching patterns emerge. The managers who ruled through intimidation. The servers who'd learned to be invisible. The pecking order that determined who got the good sections, the decent shifts, the basic respect. That evening, Emily had dinner at the rooftop restaurant, the expensive one with the 3-month waiting list. Victor had personally ensured she got a table, of course. Can't let the potential investor eat somewhere normal. The view was stunning. Seattle spread out below her, Elliott Bay glittering in the sunset, the city lights starting to twinkle. Emily sat alone at a table meant for romance and felt profoundly out of place. Her server was a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a professional smile. "Good evening, Ms. Cole. My name is Jennifer, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Emily recognized her. Jennifer had been working here when Emily started, had been kind to her during training, had slipped her leftover food when shifts ran long. "Thank you, Jennifer." Emily kept her voice neutral, gave no sign of recognition. "I'd love a recommendation. What's exceptional here?" "The halibut is beautiful tonight, and the chef does an incredible job with the short rib." "Perfect. I'll have the halibut, and a glass of the Chablis." Jennifer took her menu, and as she turned to go, Emily said quietly, "How long have you worked here?" Jennifer paused, surprised. Guests didn't usually ask. 7 years, ma'am." "Do you enjoy it?" The question hung in the air. Jennifer's professional mask flickered, and Emily saw something raw underneath. Fear, maybe, or resignation. "It's a good job," Jennifer said carefully. "Stable," which wasn't an answer at all. After Jennifer left, Emily pulled out her phone and typed, "Senior staff afraid to speak honestly. 7-year employee won't say if she enjoys her job." The food was incredible, wasted on Emily's nervous stomach. She picked at the halibut, drank half the wine, and spent the meal watching the staff move through the space like dancers in a choreographed performance. Beautiful, polished, hollow. When Jennifer brought the check, Emily added a $100 tip to the bill. Jennifer's eyes widened. "Thank you, ma'am. That's very generous." "You earned it." "And Jennifer?" Emily met her eyes. If someone wanted to know the truth about working here, really wanted to listen, would anyone talk? Jennifer's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the bill folder. "I don't understand." "I think you do." A long pause. Then Jennifer said very quietly, "People talk when they think it's safe. It's rarely safe." She left before Emily could respond. Emily sat alone with her wine and watched the city darken, thinking about safety and silence and all the ways people learn not to speak. The next day, Emily expanded her investigation. She spent the morning in the spa, getting a massage she didn't want while chatting with the therapist about working conditions. The woman was guarded but eventually admitted that turnover was high, management was demanding, and most therapists left within a year. Lunch in the lobby cafe, where she struck up a conversation with a housekeeper on break. The woman was from Ecuador, spoke limited English, but her body language said everything. Exhausted, scared, trapped. Afternoon in the gym, where the attendant, a college kid working part-time, was more open. He told her about managers who screamed at staff in back hallways, about coworkers who'd been fired for minor mistakes, about the culture of fear that made everyone miserable. "Why stay?" Emily asked. He shrugged. "Pays better than most places. And my supervisor's actually decent. It's just upper management that's the problem." "Like Victor Hale." The kid's expression shuddered immediately. "I shouldn't have said anything." "You didn't say anything wrong." "Can you not mention my name, please? I need this job." Emily promised and meant it. That evening, the hotel hosted a private event in the ballroom, some tech company's product launch. Emily wasn't invited, but Madison Cole didn't need invitations. She walked in with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere, grabbed a champagne flute from a passing server, and observed. Victor was there, schmoozing with guests, all charm and polish. Emily watched him work the room, saw the way he commanded attention, the way people responded to his authority. Then she saw him step into the hallway, and his mask dropped. A young server had spilled something, just a few drops on the carpet, barely noticeable. Victor grabbed the kid's arm, yanked him close, and Emily saw his mouth move in what was clearly a vicious whisper. The server's face crumpled. When Victor released him, the kid stumbled away looking like he might cry. Victor smoothed his jacket and walked back into the ballroom wearing that charming smile. Emily's hands clenched around her champagne glass. She pulled out her phone and typed, "Witnessed physical aggression towards staff." Victor Hale grabbed server's arm. Verbal abuse followed, staff member visibly distressed. "This is assault." Sandra's response came fast. "Can you identify the staff member? Young, maybe 19, dark hair, name tag," said David. "We'll find him. Get proof if you can. We'll find." Emily spent the rest of the evening documenting everything. The way Victor treated staff versus guests. The fear in employees' eyes when he walked past. The careful way everyone avoided his attention. By midnight, Emily was exhausted and furious. She went back to her suite, kicked off the expensive heels that were murdering her feet, and sat on the absurdly comfortable bed with her laptop. She'd been compiling notes for 2 days. The document was 15 pages long and growing. Stories from staff members who'd opened up, observations about management practices, direct quotes from employees about the culture of fear. Her phone rang. "Sandra." "How are you holding up?" Sandra asked. "I want to burn this place down." "That's the goal, but we need enough evidence first." "I have evidence. I have testimony. I watched Victor assault an employee tonight." "Did you record it?" "No, Emily stopped. "Should I have?" "If you can do it safely, yes. Video is stronger than written notes. But don't put yourself at risk." Emily rubbed her face. "This is so much worse than I expected. Everyone's terrified. The staff who've been here longest are the most broken. They've just accepted that this is normal." That's what happens in toxic environments. People normalize the abuse because it's easier than fighting. How do we fix it? One piece at a time. Keep documenting. We're building a case that goes beyond Victor. This is systematic failure. After Sandra hung up, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Jennifer's tired eyes, about the housekeeper's fear, about the college kid who'd begged her not to use his name. Around 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went down to the lobby. The night shift was quieter, different staff. Emily bought a coffee from the late-night cafe and sat in a corner chair, watching. The night manager on duty was a woman in her 30s who seemed less cruel than competent. She moved through the space efficiently, directing staff without yelling, solving problems without drama. Emily approached the cafe counter for a refill and smiled at the barista. "Quiet night?" "Quieter than day shift, thank God." The barista was around Emily's age, with purple streaks in her hair and an eyebrow piercing she'd probably been told to remove. "You staying in the hotel?" "Presidential suite." The barista's eyebrows went up. "Fancy. Business trip?" "Something like that." "How long have you worked here?" 3 months. Still new enough to have hope. She said it like a joke, but her eyes were serious. "Hope for what?" "That it'll get better. That maybe the rumors are true." Emily's pulse quickened. "What rumors?" The barista glanced around, then leaned closer. "That corporate's finally paying attention. That someone's investigating. That maybe Victor and his crew are finally going to face consequences. You believe it?" "I want to. But I've worked enough service jobs to know that management always protects management. People like us are disposable." Emily thought about the document on her laptop, about Ryan's promise to burn it down and rebuild. What if it was real? What if someone actually cared about fixing things? The barista laughed, but it was bitter. "Then I'd probably pass out from shock. Look, lady, I don't know what you do or why you're asking questions, but this is how the world works. Rich people protect rich people. The rest of us just survive." Emily wanted to tell her she was wrong, wanted to promise that change was coming, but Madison Cole wouldn't make promises to a barista at 2 a.m. So she just said, "Thanks for the coffee," and went back to her suite. The next morning, her last day undercover, Emily requested a meeting with Victor to discuss the hotel's operations. He practically tripped over himself, agreeing. They met in his office at 10 a.m. Emily wore her most expensive suit, the one that made her look like she could buy and sell him without thinking twice. Victor's office was exactly what she expected. Sleek, modern, decorated with awards and photos of him with celebrities and politicians. everything positioned to project success and importance. Ms. Cole, thank you for taking the time. Victor gestured to a chair. Can I offer you coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. Emily sat, crossed her legs, let silence stretch until he looked uncomfortable. I've spent the weekend observing your operation. I have some concerns. Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your service is polished. Your facility is beautiful. Your revenue numbers are impressive. Emily paused. But your staff are terrified. The smile froze. I'm sorry? Your employees are afraid of management, specifically afraid of you. Emily pulled out her tablet, scrolled through notes. I've spoken with servers, housekeepers, desk clerks. The consistent theme is fear-based management, verbal abuse, unrealistic expectations, retaliation against anyone who speaks up. Victor's face went through several expressions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on concern. Fake concern, but well performed. Ms. Cole, I think there may be some misunderstanding. We maintain high standards here, yes, but I watched you grab a server's arm last night, hard enough to leave marks, I'd imagine. Then you verbally berated him in the hallway. The color drained from Victor's face. That was a disciplinary matter. The employee had spilled a few drops of water, I saw. The punishment seemed disproportionate. Victor leaned back in his chair, and Emily saw him recalibrate. The charm was gone, replaced by something harder. With respect, Ms. Cole, you've been here 3 days. I've been running this hotel for 15 years. I know what it takes to maintain excellence. Apparently it takes terrorizing your staff. I prefer to think of it as maintaining standards. And I prefer to think of it as creating a hostile work environment. Emily stood, gathering her tablet. My firm won't be moving forward with acquisition. I don't invest in properties built on abuse. Victor stood too, and there was panic in his eyes now. Ms. Cole, please, if there have been misunderstandings, we can address them. I'm happy to review our management practices. You should review them, starting with your own behavior. Emily moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. That waitress you fired last week, the one who helped the homeless man. Victor blinked. Emily? What about her? What was her offense, exactly? She was insubordinate, questioned my authority in front of guests. She showed compassion to someone in need, and you punished her for it. Emily met his eyes. That tells me everything I need to know about your leadership. She left before he could respond, walked through the lobby with her head high, and didn't let herself react until she was in the car heading away from the hotel. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Sandra. I'm done, and we have enough. Sandra's response was immediate. Good, because Ryan's ready to move. Meeting at his place tonight, 7 p.m. Emily spent the afternoon in her apartment, changing out of Madison Cole's expensive armor and back into her own clothes. The transformation felt symbolic, like shedding a skin that had never quite fit. At 7, the driver picked her up and took her to an address in Madison Park she'd never been to. Ryan's house. It wasn't what she expected. She'd been picturing something modern and cold, all glass and steel. Instead, it was a craftsman-style home, beautiful but not ostentatious, with a garden and warm lights in the windows. Sandra met her at the door. He's in the study with the legal team. Come on. Emily followed her through a house that felt lived in. Toys in the corner, drawings on the refrigerator, photos on the walls. Ryan and a little girl with dark hair and those same intense eyes. The study was full of people. Ryan, James, and his legal team, and several others Emily didn't recognize. Everyone looked up when she entered. Ryan stood. Emily, how did it go? He's worse than we thought, and we were already thinking pretty bad. For the next 2 hours, Emily walked them through everything. Every conversation, every observation, every piece of evidence she'd gathered. The legal team took notes, asked questions, built their case. When she finished, James looked at Ryan. We have enough to terminate Victor for cause. Probably enough to go after several of his managers, too. The question is how public we want to make this. Very public, Ryan said immediately. I want everyone to know why this happened. I want every other manager in my company to understand that this culture ends now. That opens us up to lawsuits, one of the other attorneys warned. Let them sue. We'll win, and even if we don't, it's worth it. Emily watched him, saw the cold fury in his eyes, and understood that this wasn't just about justice anymore. This was personal. What about the staff? She asked. The people who've been hurt by this, what happens to them? Ryan looked at her. What do you think should happen? I think they deserve better than watching us burn Victor without addressing why they couldn't speak up themselves. I think we need to create actual support systems, not just remove the problem and hope a new manager is better. Emily took a breath. And I think some of them are going to need therapy, real professional help dealing with workplace trauma. The room was quiet. James cleared his throat. That's not typically how corporate restructuring works. Then maybe we should change how it works, Emily said. Ryan smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was sharp and pleased and a little bit dangerous. Draw up the plan. Mental health support for all Grand Meridian staff, paid leave for anyone who needs it, and I want an anonymous reporting system so employees can flag problems without fear of retaliation. The legal team exchanged glances but started taking notes. When do we move? Emily asked. Next Friday. I've scheduled a mandatory all-staff meeting in the ballroom, everyone from management to entry level. We'll present the findings, announce the terminations, and outline the new structure. Ryan looked at her. I'd like you there, on stage, showing them who uncovered this. Emily's stomach dropped. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. They need to see that someone like you, someone who was one of them, is now in a position of power. They need to know the system can change. They'll hate me. I'll be the person who got their coworkers fired. Some will. Others will see you as the person who finally spoke up for them. Ryan's voice was firm. This is part of the job, Emily. Not the easy part, but necessary. Emily thought about Jennifer's tired eyes, about the barista's cynicism, about every employee who'd learned that speaking up only got you hurt. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. The meeting wrapped up around 10. The legal team filed out, leaving Emily and Ryan alone in the study. You did good work, Ryan said. Really good. I knew you would, but seeing it all laid out like that. He shook his head. I'm sorry you had to see how bad it was. I lived it before. This time I just had better shoes. Ryan laughed, surprised and genuine. The shoes did look expensive. They were torture devices disguised as footwear. I don't know how rich people walk. Carefully, and with good health insurance for the inevitable foot surgery. They smiled at each other, and Emily felt something shift in the air, something warm and complicated and probably a terrible idea. Daddy? They both turned. A little girl stood in the doorway, clutching a stuffed rabbit and rubbing her eyes. Sophie, sweetie, you should be asleep. Ryan crossed the room, scooped her up. She buried her face in his neck. Had a bad dream. Want to tell me about it? Monsters. The monsters can't get you here, I promise. Ryan looked at Emily over Sophie's head, and his whole face had transformed. Softer, unguarded, human in a way he never was in the office. Sophie lifted her head and noticed Emily. Who's that? This is Emily. She works with Daddy. Sophie studied Emily with serious eyes. Are you nice? Emily smiled. I try to be. Daddy says trying is important. Sophie yawned. Can Emily read me a story? Sophie, Emily was just leaving. It's okay, Emily said. I can read one story. Sophie's face lit up, and Ryan looked grateful and surprised in equal measure. They went upstairs to Sophie's room. Walls painted soft yellow, shelves full of books, toys organized in bins. Sophie climbed into bed and handed Emily a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. Emily read while Ryan sat in a chair by the window, and Sophie's eyes slowly closed. By the time the rabbit became real, she was asleep, the stuffed bunny clutched in her arms. Emily set the book down carefully and followed Ryan out of the room. Downstairs, he walked her to the door. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. She's sweet. She's the reason I'm doing all this. I don't want her growing up thinking the way I've run things is normal. Don't want her to become someone who values profit over people. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw exhaustion and determination and fear all tangled together. You're a good dad, she said softly. I'm trying to be. Most days I feel like I'm failing. That's how you know you're doing it right. The people who don't worry are usually the ones screwing up. Ryan smiled, and it reached his eyes this time. When did you get so wise? My mom, she had a lot of opinions about parenting and life and basically everything. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, would have told you to stop working so much and take Sophie to the park more. She would have been right. They stood in the doorway, and Emily knew she should leave but didn't want to. This felt safe, standing here in the quiet house with someone who saw her as more than an employee or a project. Friday's going to be hard, Ryan said finally, confronting Victor in front of everyone, watching people lose their jobs. Are you ready? No, but I'll do it anyway. That's all any of us can do. He reached out, squeezed her hand briefly. Get some rest. And Emily, thank you for everything. Emily went home with his words echoing in her head and the warmth of his hand still ghosting across hers. 1 week. That's all she had until everything exploded. She spent it preparing for war. The week crawled by like it was trying to torture Emily personally. She spent her days preparing for Friday's confrontation, reviewing evidence with the legal team, rehearsing what she'd say on stage. Nights, she couldn't sleep. Just lay in her apartment staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible way it could go wrong. Wednesday afternoon, Sandra called her into Ryan's office for a final briefing. When Emily arrived, Ryan was pacing like a caged animal, his tie loosened and hair disheveled in a way that suggested he'd been running his hands through it for hours. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Emily's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Victor knows something's happening. He's been calling board members, sending emails, trying to build support. Ryan threw a printed email on the desk. He's claiming we're conducting a witch hunt based on complaints from disgruntled employees. Emily scanned the email. Victor's words were carefully crafted, painting himself as a dedicated manager being unfairly targeted, the staff as malcontents looking for excuses. He's scared, Emily said. That's good, right? Means he knows we have something. It also means he's dangerous. Cornered animals fight back. Ryan stopped pacing, looked at her directly. I need to know you're still in. Because if Victor gets wind that you were Madison Cole, that you're the one who gathered the evidence, he'll come after you. Legally, professionally, maybe worse. Emily thought about the barista's cynicism, about Jennifer's exhaustion, about the kid who'd begged her not to use his name, about every person at the Grand Meridian who'd learned that speaking up only brought pain. I'm in, she said. Someone has to be. Friday arrived with gray skies that felt appropriate for what was coming. Emily dressed carefully, professional but not expensive, wanting to look competent without looking like she'd forgotten where she came from. Black pants, white blouse, blazer. Simple. Real. Ryan had insisted on sending a car, but Emily refused. She took the bus to the Grand Meridian, same as she used to, and stood outside those glass doors one more time. Last time she'd been here as Emily Carter, Victor had fired her. Before that, she'd been Madison Cole, the consultant who'd uncovered his corruption. Now she was something else entirely, Ryan Sterling's representative, about to walk into that ballroom and help burn Victor's world down. Her hands shook as she pulled open the door. The lobby was empty of guests. Ryan had cleared the hotel for the day, buying out every reservation so this could happen in private. Only staff remained, and they moved through the space with nervous energy, whispering to each other, everyone wondering what the emergency meeting was about. Emily saw Jennifer by the elevator, looking exhausted and worried, saw the college kid from the gym, pale and anxious, saw faces she recognized from her time working here, people who'd been colleagues and were now witnesses. None of them recognized her yet. She'd been invisible to most of them back then. Sandra met her near the ballroom entrance. Ryan's already inside. Legal teams in place. We're ready when you are. I'm not ready. Good. Neither was I when I gave my first big presentation. Did it anyway. That's how you know you're growing. Emily took a breath and walked into the ballroom. The space was set up like a corporate presentation. Stage at the front, chairs arranged in rows, a massive screen behind the podium. Employees filed in slowly, confused and nervous. Management clustered together near the back, Victor at the center looking furious and trying to hide it. Ryan stood off to the side with James and the legal team, his expression unreadable. When he saw Emily, something flickered in his eyes, concern maybe, or solidarity. Emily took her seat in the front row, feeling every eye on her. She heard whispers, people wondering who she was, why she was sitting up front like she mattered. At exactly 2 p.m., Ryan walked onto the stage. The room went silent. He stood at the podium, looked out at the assembled staff, and Emily could see the moment he shifted into CEO mode. Shoulders back, expression serious, voice commanding. "Thank you all for coming," he said, and his voice carried across the ballroom without needing a microphone. "I know this is unusual. I know you're worried. Some of you probably think you're about to be fired." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "You're not. Most of you aren't anyway." Ryan's expression hardened. "But some people in this room are about to have a very bad day. Because 2 weeks ago I learned that the Grand Meridian, my flagship property, the hotel I'm most proud of, has become a place where employees are abused, threatened, and dehumanized on a daily basis." The room erupted in whispers. Victor's face went white, then red. "I conducted an investigation," Ryan continued. "A thorough one. What I found was systematic mistreatment of staff at every level. Verbal abuse, physical intimidation, retaliation against anyone who dared to speak up. A culture of fear so pervasive that people stopped seeing it as abnormal." Emily watched the crowd's reactions. Some people looked shocked. Others looked vindicated, like they'd been waiting years for someone to finally acknowledge the truth. "I want to show you something," Ryan said, and the screen behind him lit up. Footage began to play. Victor grabbing the young server's arm in the hallway, his face twisted in anger. Audio of managers screaming at staff in back corridors, screenshots of threatening emails, testimony from employees, faces blurred to protect their identities, talking about the abuse they'd endured. The ballroom was dead silent except for the damning evidence playing out on screen. When it ended, Ryan stepped forward again. "This is not acceptable. This is not how my company operates. And it ends today." He pulled out a piece of paper. "Effective immediately, the following individuals are terminated for cause: Victor Hale, General Manager; Robert Chen, Assistant General Manager; Michelle Torres, Head of Housekeeping; Daniel Wright, Restaurant Manager." With each name, someone in the crowd gasped or flinched. Emily saw Victor surge to his feet, his face purple with rage. "This is a setup," Victor shouted. "You can't." "I can, and I am. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings under supervision. Your employment contracts have been terminated for violations of company policy and basic human decency. You're done." Security guards appeared from the sides of the ballroom, moving toward the named managers. The room descended into chaos. Some people crying, others cheering, most just sitting in shocked silence. Victor pushed past a security guard, strode toward the stage. "You're making a mistake, Sterling. I built this hotel. I made it profitable. I made you money. You made me complicit," Ryan said, his voice cutting through Victor's bluster like a knife. "You ran this hotel by terrorizing people who couldn't fight back. You turned hospitality into hostility, and you're not going to do it anymore." "Based on what? Anonymous complaints from employees too weak to handle real work? Based on evidence collected by someone who experienced your management firsthand." Ryan gestured to Emily. "Someone you fired for showing basic human kindness." Every eye in the room turned to Emily. She stood up, legs shaking, and walked onto the stage. The walk felt like a mile. Victor stared at her, confused at first. Then recognition dawned, and his expression went from confusion to disbelief to fury. "Emily?" He spit her name like a curse. "You were Madison Cole?" "I was," Emily said, and her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You fired me for helping someone you thought was beneath you. Turns out that someone owned this hotel, and I spent the last week documenting every way you've made this place toxic." Victor's face contorted. "You lying little—" "Watch yourself," Ryan said, his voice dangerous. "You're already fired. Don't add assault to the list." Security took Victor's arms, and he struggled briefly before going rigid with impotent rage. "This isn't over. I'll sue. I'll destroy you both." "Try it," Ryan said. "My legal team would enjoy the practice." They dragged Victor toward the exit, and Emily watched him go, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and pity. He'd built his identity on power and control, and now it was stripped away in front of everyone. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt sad for how small he looked. The other terminated managers followed, some defiant, others in tears. The ballroom was electric with shock and whispered conversations. Ryan held up his hand for silence. "I know this is a lot to process. I know some of you are scared about what comes next. Let me be clear. The rest of you are not in danger, but things are going to change. He outlined the new structure. Employee assistance programs, anonymous reporting systems, mental health support, new management hired from outside, trained in leadership that didn't rely on fear. And I'm appointing someone to oversee this transformation, Ryan continued. Someone who understands what it's like to work here, who fought for what was right even when it cost her everything. Emily Carter will be the new director of employee relations and culture for Sterling Hospitality Group. Emily's head snapped toward Ryan. They hadn't discussed a title, hadn't discussed making this permanent. This was supposed to be temporary, just until they fixed the Grand Meridian. Ryan met her eyes and smiled slightly, like he knew exactly what he'd just done. The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Some applauded, including Jennifer, who was crying and clapping at the same time. Others looked suspicious or resentful. A few walked out. When the room settled, an employee near the back stood up. The purple-haired barista from Emily's undercover weekend. I have a question, she said, her voice shaking but determined. How do we know this is real? How do we know you're not just replacing Victor with someone who'll be exactly the same once the attention dies down? Ryan looked at Emily. That's a fair question. Emily? Emily stepped forward, her heart pounding. She looked out at the sea of faces, tired, scared, hopeful, cynical, and saw herself in every single one. You don't know, she said honestly. You have no reason to trust me or Mr. Sterling or any of this. I was you 2 weeks ago. I was the waitress who got fired for helping someone. I was broke and scared and convinced that nothing would ever change because the world doesn't work that way. She took a breath. But then someone did something impossible. Someone gave me a chance I didn't deserve, trusted me when I couldn't trust myself, and showed me that maybe the world can work differently if enough people decide to make it happen. I can't promise everything will be perfect. I can't promise there won't be more problems or new challenges or days when it feels like nothing changed at all. But I can promise I'll fight for you, because I remember what it felt like to be powerless. And I won't let myself forget. The room was silent. Then Jennifer stood up and started clapping. Slowly, others joined her. Not everyone. Some people sat with arms crossed, unconvinced. But enough. Enough to matter. The meeting wrapped up an hour later with more details about the transition, resources for affected employees, and a hotline for reporting concerns. People filed out in small groups, some crying, some angry, most just overwhelmed. Emily stood on the empty stage afterward, feeling like she'd just run a marathon. Ryan walked over. You did good up there. You ambushed me with that title. Had to. Couldn't give you time to talk yourself out of it. Director of Employee Relations and Culture? That's not a real job. It is now. You made it real. Ryan's expression was serious. I meant what I said. I need you to oversee this across all properties. Make sure what happened here doesn't happen anywhere else. That's huge. That's exactly what you're qualified for. Not because of degrees or credentials, but because you understand what matters. Because you'll never forget what it felt like to be on the other side. Emily wanted to argue, but she was too exhausted. Can we talk about this later? I need to... She didn't know what she needed to process, to breathe, to figure out who she was now that everything had changed again. Go home. Rest. We'll figure out the details next week. Ryan touched her arm briefly. Thank you, Emily, for your courage, for speaking truth, for being exactly who you are. Sandra appeared with Emily's coat. Car's waiting whenever you're ready. This time, Emily didn't argue about the car. She was too tired to take the bus, too wrung out to pretend she was still the person who couldn't afford better. She went home to her tiny apartment with the rattling blinds and the dripping sink and sat on her milk crate coffee table couch, feeling untethered from reality. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Thank you for fighting for us. Jennifer. Then another. You're braver than I'll ever be. David. The kid Victor had grabbed. Then more. A flood of messages from employees she'd never met, thanking her, sharing their stories, telling her what it meant to finally be heard. Emily read every single one, crying quietly in her empty apartment, understanding for the first time that maybe her mom had been right. Maybe kindness did matter. Maybe it didn't just make you feel less terrible about the broken world. Maybe it actually helped fix it, one small choice at a time. 3 months later, Emily stood in the renovated Grand Meridian lobby watching the evening shift change. The space looked the same physically, still crystal chandeliers and marble floors, but the energy was completely different. Employees moved through it with their shoulders back, smiling real smiles, no longer flinching when managers walked past. The new general manager was a woman named Patricia, who'd worked her way up from housekeeping at another property. She led with quiet competence and actually asked staff how they were doing, like she meant it. Victor's lawsuit had been dismissed 2 weeks ago. He tried to claim wrongful termination, but the evidence was too damning. Last Emily heard, he was working at a mid-tier hotel in Tacoma, no longer in management. Emily felt a complicated sort of satisfaction about that. Not joy, exactly, but a sense that justice had been served without being cruel. He'd lost his power, but not his livelihood. He'd faced consequences, but not destruction. She'd learned in 3 months that fixing broken systems was messier than destroying them. Some employees thrived with the new management. Others struggled with the transition, so used to fear-based motivation that kindness felt suspicious. A few quit, unable to adapt. But slowly, steadily, the culture was changing. Emily had spent the last 12 weeks visiting every Sterling hospitality property, talking to thousands of employees, implementing the new support systems. It was exhausting and rewarding and terrifying, and some days she still felt like a fraud playing dress-up in a job too big for her. But she kept showing up. "Miss Carter," Emily turned. Patricia was approaching with a young woman in a server uniform, new, based on how nervous she looked. "This is Amanda. It's her first day. I thought maybe you could talk to her, share some wisdom." Emily smiled at Amanda, saw her own fear reflected back. "First day is always the hardest. What are you most worried about?" "Making mistakes. Getting fired for doing something wrong." Amanda's voice was barely a whisper. "You'll make mistakes. Everyone does. The difference now is that we'll help you learn from them instead of punishing you for being human." Emily gestured to the lobby. "See all these people? 3 months ago, they were terrified to come to work. Now look at them. That's what good leadership looks like. And you're part of building that." Amanda nodded, still nervous but slightly less terrified. After she left, Patricia said quietly, "You're good at this. I just remember what it felt like to be her. That's why you're good at it. Don't lose that." Emily's phone buzzed. Text from Ryan. "Sophie's birthday party tomorrow. She specifically requested you be there. Please say yes before I have to explain to a 6-year-old what prior commitments means." Emily smiled. Over the past 3 months, she'd become a regular fixture at Ryan's house. Dinners with him and Sophie, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories when Ryan got stuck in late meetings. It had happened gradually, naturally, until one day Emily realized she wasn't just an employee anymore. She was something more complicated, something that felt dangerously close to family. She typed back, "What time?" 2 p.m. Fair warning, she invited half her class, and there will be a bouncy castle. Dress for chaos. I'll bring earplugs. Bring wine. For the adults. We'll need it. The next afternoon, Emily showed up at Ryan's house with a wrapped present and a bottle of decent Chardonnay. The chaos was immediately apparent. Children everywhere, screaming with joy. Parents clustered in corners looking exhausted, and a massive bouncy castle dominating the backyard. Sophie saw Emily and launched herself across the lawn. "Emily, you came!" Emily caught her laughing. "Of course I came. Wouldn't miss it." "Did you bring me a present?" "Sophie, manners!" Ryan called from the patio, where he was managing the grill with the slightly panicked expression of a man who'd bitten off more than he could chew. "It's okay." Emily handed Sophie the present. "But you have to wait until cake time to open it." Sophie hugged the present to her chest and ran off to show her friends, and Emily walked over to Ryan. "You look stressed," she observed. "There are 23 children in my backyard. 23. Why did I agree to this?" "Because you're a good dad who can't say no to his daughter." "I need better boundaries." Emily laughed and took the spatula from his hand. "Go manage the children. I'll handle the burgers. You don't have to. Ryan, go." He went, looking grateful. Emily manned the grill, chatting with other parents who drifted over, and found herself enjoying the normalcy of it. No corporate drama, no investigations, just a backyard birthday party with slightly burnt hot dogs and way too much sugar. When it was time for cake, everyone gathered around while Sophie blew out her candles. She looked so happy, surrounded by friends and love, that Emily felt something tight in her chest. This was what mattered, not the hotels or the money or the power. This, connection, joy, people taking care of each other. After the party wound down and the last parent collected their sugar-crashed child, Emily helped Ryan clean up the disaster zone that used to be his backyard. "Thank you for today," Ryan said, stuffing paper plates into a trash bag. "You didn't have to stay for cleanup. I wanted to. Besides, you looked like you might cry if I left you alone with this mess." "I was definitely close to tears. There's frosting on my ceiling." "How does frosting get on the ceiling?" Children are chaos incarnate. You'll never understand them. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, and Emily realized how natural this felt. How right. Being here with Ryan and Sophie felt more like home than her apartment ever had. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said eventually. "Sure." "Are you happy? With the job? With everything that's happened? Are you okay?" Emily thought about it. 3 months ago, she'd been unemployed and drowning in debt. Now she had a career, financial stability, and purpose. By any objective measure, she should be ecstatic. "I'm terrified most of the time," she admitted. "I wake up every day convinced someone will realize I have no idea what I'm doing. But yeah, I'm happy. Or at least I'm becoming happy. It's a work in progress. That's all any of us are. Works in progress." Ryan tied off the trash bag. "You've changed my company in 3 months. Changed me too, honestly. Made me remember what actually matters." "What matters?" "People. Not profits, not expansion, just people treating each other with basic humanity." He looked at her, and his expression was open in a way she'd rarely seen. "You reminded me of that, and I'm grateful." Emily felt heat creep up her neck. This was dangerous territory. She was his employee. This was professional, except it hadn't felt professional for a while now, and they both knew it. "Ryan, I know, this is complicated. You work for me, there's a power dynamic, it would be inappropriate." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "But I can't stop thinking about you. About how you walked into my life during the worst moment and somehow made everything make sense again." Emily's heart was racing. "I gave you my last $20 because you looked cold. You saw me when I was invisible. You chose kindness when everyone else chose cruelty. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I was just being a decent person." "Exactly. And that changed everything." They stood in the debris of the birthday party, surrounded by deflated balloons and abandoned toys, and Emily felt the weight of the moment. She could step back, maintain the professional boundary, keep things simple, or she could admit that somewhere between the investigation and the confrontation and the late-night strategy sessions, she'd fallen for the workaholic billionaire who was trying desperately to be a good father and a better person. "This is a terrible idea," she said softly. "Probably the worst. We work together. People will talk. They'll say you're taking advantage, that I only have my job because I don't care what people say. I care what's true. And the truth is you earned every bit of your position through courage and competence and caring about things most people have given up on." Ryan stepped closer. "But if this makes you uncomfortable, if you want to keep things professional, I'll respect that. I'll never mention it again." Emily looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the exhaustion and the hope and the fear of someone who'd been hurt before and was taking a chance anyway. She thought about her mom's advice about opportunities disguised as terror, about how the scariest choices were usually the important ones. "Sophie," Emily said, "if this goes wrong, if we try this and it doesn't work, what happens to her? I can't be someone who comes into her life and then leaves. She's already lost too much. Then we don't let it go wrong. We figure it out like adults because we both care about her too much to be careless. You're very confident for someone proposing we date while working together. I'm not confident. I'm hopeful. There's a difference." Emily smiled despite herself. "This is insane." "Completely insane," Ryan agreed. "But then again, so was hiring a fired waitress to investigate my company, and that worked out pretty well." "Did it?" "The jury's still out on whether I'm actually good at this job. The jury came back weeks ago. You're exceptional. You're just too stubborn to believe it." Emily closed the distance between them, and Ryan's breath caught. "If we do this, we do it right. No hiding, no pretending. I won't be your secret. I don't want you to be a secret. I want you to be exactly what you are." "What's that?" "Someone real in a world full of performance. Someone who reminds me why any of this matters. Emily kissed him, and it was nothing like the movies. It was awkward and tentative and tasted like birthday cake frosting, and it was perfect in its imperfection. When they pulled apart, Ryan was smiling. So we're doing this? We're doing this, but if you turn into one of those bosses who plays favorites, I'm quitting and taking Sophie with me. Deal. And if you turn into one of those employees who expects special treatment, I'm firing you and keeping your apartment key so you can't avoid me. I don't have an apartment key to your place. Give it time. 6 months later, Emily moved out of her apartment with the rattling blinds and into Ryan's house in Madison Park. It wasn't a romantic gesture or a grand statement. It was practical. She was spending most nights there anyway, helping with Sophie, and the commute from her old place was getting ridiculous. But it felt significant anyway, like closing one chapter and starting another. The Grand Meridian was thriving under Patricia's leadership. Employee satisfaction scores had tripled. Turnover was down 70%. Guest reviews were better than ever, and not because service was more polished, but because it was more genuine. Emily had expanded the cultural review to all 43 properties. So far, they'd terminated 6 managers for abuse, promoted 12 employees who'd been overlooked under the old system, and implemented support structures that were becoming industry news. Other hospitality companies were taking notice, asking how Sterling had managed such a dramatic transformation. Ryan always gave the same answer. We started seeing our employees as human beings instead of assets. Everything else followed from that. Emily still struggled with imposter syndrome. Still had days when she felt like a fraud in expensive clothes, pretending to know what she was doing. But she was learning that everyone felt that way sometimes. And the difference between success and failure was mostly just refusing to quit when it got hard. Sophie had adjusted to having Emily around with the easy acceptance of children. She'd started calling Emily her almost mom, which made Emily cry the first time and smile every time after. They had routines now, breakfast together, homework help, bedtime stories, weekend adventures. It felt like family, messy and complicated and imperfect, but real. One evening in late spring, Emily sat on Ryan's patio watching Sophie chase fireflies in the backyard. Ryan brought out 2 glasses of wine and settled next to her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. "Just thinking about how different everything is from a year ago, how impossible all this would have seemed. You standing in the rain with your last $20? Me standing anywhere, being happy, having people who care about me, believing I matter." Emily took a sip of wine. "My whole life I felt invisible, like I was just passing through other people's stories. And then you saw me. You weren't invisible. Everyone else was just blind. Maybe, or maybe I needed to be invisible for a while so I'd remember what it felt like. So I wouldn't lose that when I got power." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "Do you think we did the right thing? With Victor, with all of it. Sometimes I wonder if we were too harsh." "You gave him consequences, not cruelty. There's a difference." Emily watched Sophie catch a firefly, her delighted laugh carrying across the yard. "And you gave everyone else hope that standing up to bullies actually works. That matters more." "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. Just would have taken longer and been messier." "Always so modest. Always so realistic." Emily smiled. "We're a good team. You bring the resources and authority. I bring the perspective and empathy. Together, we're almost one functional person." Ryan laughed. "Highest compliment I've ever received." Sophie ran over, breathless and glowing. "Emily, did you see? I caught 3 fireflies." "I saw. You're an excellent firefly hunter. Daddy says we can't keep them because they need to be free, but can we at least watch them for a little bit?" "Of course we can." They spent the next hour in the gathering dusk, watching fireflies blink in the garden while Sophie narrated elaborate stories about where they were going and what they were saying. Eventually, she fell asleep on the patio swing and Ryan carried her inside to bed.